Chapter 1024. After 300 meters, Charlotte stopped in a place. He reached out and knocked on the cement wall of the sewage pipe. He used a lot of strength, but there was no sound of air behind the cement wall. Under normal circumstances, judging by the sound, the cement wall was solid, but he said, "It's here. Akiko, blow it up." Akiko Tsukino was puzzled. "I heard you knocking on the wall. It's not empty behind. Are you sure you want me to blow up this place?" Charlotte said, "Trust me, blow it up." Akiko Tsukino stopped asking and took out the explosive device from her backpack. It was a special, directional explosive device. The power of the explosion was not very strong, and it was almost silent. Charlotte patted a place on the cement wall with his hand. "It's here." Akiko Tsukino stuck the explosive device to the place where Charlotte had patted, and then she and Charlotte stepped back about 10 steps to avoid the explosion. She pressed the remote control in her hand. Boom! With a muffled sound, the cement wall trembled and then collapsed backward. Before the smoke cleared, Charlotte came to the gap that had been blown up. Behind the gap was an even older sewer. It was high, wide, and very dry. This was the drainage system of Jerusalem in ancient times. Last time, Charlotte used this drainage system to find the ancient tomb under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. 48 Holy Cross Street was a building built during the Crusades, and a dungeon was built there, so there must be an ancient sewer under it. The area that the sanitation department in Jerusalem had marked with a shadow on the drainage system blueprint was obviously part of the ancient water system in Jerusalem. Mossad did not want people to know this secret, so there was a shadow on the blueprint. There really is a drainage ditch. Boss, you're amazing. Akiko Tsukino looked at Charlotte with her eyes shining. Charlotte stepped over the gap in the cement pipe. "Let's go. We don't have much time left." Akiko Tsukino followed Charlotte and jumped into the ancient drain. Charlotte walked forward for about 20 meters. The originally flat, ancient drain suddenly sank down, and the drop reached 2 meters. He jumped down without hesitation. Akiko Tsukino jumped down as well. Xiale walked forward for another 10 meters and saw the exit of a well in front of him. When his line of sight shifted to the drain of the well, a stream of dirty water rushed down from above. His lips curled into a smile. "That's it. We found it." Akiko Tsukino asked, "Does this well lead to number 48 Holy Cross Road?" Charlotte nodded and said, "It's the dungeon of Holy Cross 48. This sewer is the drainage pipe of the dungeon. We'll go up from here, find the prisoner, and take him away from here." Akiko Tsukino said, "If this is a dungeon, it must have more than one prisoner. We haven't even seen the prisoner. How do we know who to take away?" This seemed to be a simple problem, but it was also what worried Charlotte the most. He had actually thought about this problem, but he couldn't find a solution at all. The only thing he could rely on was his left eye and his brain. The combination of these two had a strong analytical ability. Of course, there was also an element of gambling in this. He was betting on his luck. His left eye, his brain, and his luck seemed to be very unreliable in the eyes of ordinary people. But for him, his confidence index could reach 80%. In fact, let alone 80%. Even if it was only a 50% chance, he would still give it a try. "Be careful. Follow me." Charlotte grabbed the iron ladder and climbed up. The dirty water that flowed down from above splashed on his body. Although he was wearing a breathing mask, he could still smell the disgusting stench. Akiko Tsukino followed behind Charlotte and climbed up. The stench made her frown. After climbing up about 3 meters, a cast iron manhole cover blocked the way out. Charlotte awakened the X-ray ability of his left eye and used it to see through the edge of the manhole cover. He quickly saw clearly that there was a public bathroom and toilet above. It was a place for prisoners to bathe and relieve themselves. There was no one in the bathroom. It was empty and quiet. Charlotte lowered his head and used his back to push the manhole cover up. The manhole cover had not been opened for a long time. The rust made it very stubborn. Charlotte hit it twice, but he couldn't push it up. "Oh no, it's rusty." Charlotte's mood suddenly became bad. He had calculated everything, except for the fact that the manhole cover was rusty. This was an oversight. Even the smartest person couldn't calculate everything. There would always be something missing. "Let me blow it up," Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte said, "No. If it is detonated here, the sound of the explosion will be heard by the people of Mossad." "Then what should we do?" Akiko Tsukino looked at the multifunction watch on her hand and said anxiously, "We only have 18 minutes left. If we delay any more, we won't be able to make it in time for the agreed retreat." "Oomph." Charlotte hit it again. This time, he used all his strength. The sound coming from his nostrils was like the sound of a cow plowing the fields. But the manhole cover still didn't move. The manhole cover was not welded or equipped with a guardrail, because the Mossad knew its structure very well. The ancient drainage system was a secret in Israel. Very few people knew about it. The drainage system used at 48 Holy Cross Road was this ancient drainage system. Since it was used, the manhole cover had not been opened more than 5 times. Every time it was opened, it would take a lot of effort. So, who would care about it that no one knew about it, and it was extremely difficult to open? Another minute passed. There were still 17 minutes before the agreed retreat time. Charlotte was burning with anxiety. If this operation failed because of a rusty manhole cover, it would really be a joke. But at this moment, Akiko Tsukino suddenly climbed up and pulled open Charlotte's zipper. Then, her hand grabbed a place that shouldn't be grabbed. "Akiko, what are you doing?" Charlotte was stunned. Akiko Tsukino didn't say anything. She took off her breathing mask and suddenly moved her head forward. "Don't." Charlotte felt as if he had been bitten by a venomous snake. His body suddenly slammed upwards, trying to avoid Akiko Tsukino's attack. The sudden burst of strength was so shocking that the rusty manhole cover moved. Akiko Tsukino still didn't say anything, but her small mouth was very persuasive. In a very short period of time, she used her silver tongue to persuade a sleeping lion. Charlotte slammed into it again. Crack! The manhole cover was completely loosened. A ray of light shone down from the edge of the manhole cover and shone on Akiko Tsukino's face. A naughty smile appeared on her face. The scene was like a bad girl eating a popsicle and looking at the boy she was teasing with provocative eyes. "I'll deal with you when we get back," Charlotte said fiercely. Akiko Tsukino returned the place that she had attacked to its original position. She said softly, "No problem. You can deal with it however you want." Charlotte was speechless. Charlotte sighed in his heart. He didn't know when he would be able to clear up the mess between him and Akiko Tsukino. However, the Japanese ninja's boldness and openness in certain aspects had given him a lot of insight. The manhole cover was moved to the side. Charlotte climbed out of the manhole. His eyes quickly scanned through all the surroundings that he could see. There was no one in the public bathroom. There was no one in the toilet. He walked toward the door. His left eye's vision had already penetrated the door and entered a new area. Outside the public bathroom was a corridor. On both sides of the corridor were prison cells. Both the corridor and the prison cells looked very old. Everywhere exuded a strong sense of history. Akiko Tsukino came behind Charlotte. In her hands was a Viper pistol with a silencer and a shuriken dipped in poison. Charlotte turned around to look at her. He froze for a moment. Then he reached out and plucked a black mustache from Akiko Tsukino's cherry lips. He held it in his hand, not daring to let her see it. Akiko Tsukino's face inexplicably turned red. Charlotte's act of burying one's head in the sand had clearly failed. This was a small interlude in the operation. It didn't affect the two of them. Charlotte pushed open the bathroom door and entered the corridor. Akiko Tsukino followed closely. The prison cells on both sides of the corridor were empty. There were no prisoners. This wasn't surprising. This place wasn't a professional prison. Mossad would only detain prisoners with special identities. There couldn't be many such prisoners. In fact, the fact that Haid went to the restaurant across the street to buy breakfast every morning was enough to explain the situation. If it was a professional prison with many prisoners, then there would definitely be a kitchen and a chef. Haid wouldn't have to go out to buy breakfast. If I'm lucky, there's only one prisoner in this ancient prison, and that person is the one I'm looking for. There's no need for me to eliminate him. It seems like my luck isn't too bad. The empty prison made Charlotte happy. He didn't have to eliminate and analyze other prisoners. His footsteps were much faster. After turning a corner, the corridor continued forward. At the end of the corridor was a stone staircase. The staircase led upward. It was obviously the passage to the inside of Mossad's base. Charlotte's gaze moved to a wooden iron door at the corner. The door was tightly shut. There were 2 copper basins on the stone walls on both sides of the door. They looked very old and were not in use. There was an LED ceiling lamp above the door. It was lit and emitted a cold light. Charlotte had a feeling in his heart. He moved forward and his left. I looked through the iron door. A prisoner lying in a pile of grass entered his sight. The prisoner looked terrible. His hair was messy and greasy. He hadn't showered in months. His clothes were torn and tattered. The grease on the cloth was black and shiny from friction. He was curled up in the grass. His face couldn't be seen. Charlotte's gaze suddenly moved to the right arm that peeked out from the tattered sleeve. He couldn't look away anymore. There was a king cobra tattoo on the prisoner's right arm. It had a green body, red eyes, and a tongue. It looked very scary. An image suddenly appeared in Charlotte's mind. In the pyramid inside the mountain on the outskirts of Jerusalem, a tall man killed the Israeli archaeologist with 1 shot and then took away the amber that contained the AE capsule from time. It was him. Chapter 1025. Just as he was about to reach the door, Charlotte suddenly stopped. He raised his head to look at the surveillance camera on the wall of the corridor. The camera was facing the iron door of the cell. He only needed to take 2 more steps to enter the range of the surveillance camera. Just as he stopped, Akiko Tsukino reached out to grab his arm. She had also noticed the surveillance camera on the wall of the corridor. She pulled his hand to stop him from going over. However, her warning did not come as quickly as his alertness. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch on his wrist. There were 30 seconds left before Yelena cut off the optical fiber. He was secretly glad that he did not make a low-level mistake. When people are excited, it is easy for them to overlook some basic things. Sometimes, a small mistake can lead to irreparable consequences. The 30 seconds passed in the blink of an eye. Charlotte's gaze was locked onto the surveillance camera. He saw a red warning light on the surveillance camera. Yelena had cut off the optical fiber to 48 Holy Cross Road. The timing was just right. Charlotte quickly walked to the iron door. 15 seconds later, he used a tool to pick the lock to open the door. The iron door opened and Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino walked in. After entering, Akiko Tsukino closed the door. She had to do this because the direction of the iron door was facing the stone staircase that led to the Mossad base. If someone came down from above, they would be able to see the door open. There was a pungent smell of urine and feces in the cell, and the air was turbid. Akiko Tsukino's brows furrowed again. Like most women, she did not like dirty and messy environments. "Hey," Charlotte said in English. "Wake up." The man with the king cobra tattoo did not move. It appeared that he had fallen asleep or fainted. Charlotte walked to his side and used his foot to nudge him. In that instant, the man with the eye king snake tattoo on his arm suddenly flipped over from the haystack. His right leg ferociously kicked at the vital spot between Charlotte's legs. A second ago, he was like a dead dog, but in less than a second, he had transformed from a dead dog into a ferocious tiger that could take a person's life with a single bite. Caught off guard, Charlotte hurriedly raised his right leg and used his hardest knee to block his attack. Bang! Under the impact, Charlotte's body shook, and he took half a step back. After all, he was supporting his body with one leg, and it was difficult for him to maintain his balance under the violent impact. The man with the king cobra tattoo was in such a terrible condition, but he was still so powerful and fast. If he was healthy, one could imagine how terrifying his strength would be. The ambush failed, and the man with the king cobra tattoo jumped out from the bushes. But before he could attack, Akiko Tsukino pointed the viper pistol in her hand at his head. "Move again, and I'll kill you." Akiko Tsukino's voice was very cold. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not attack Charlotte or Akiko Tsukino again. He did not know the identity of the two Native Americans in front of him and why they had come. If he continued to attack, the Native American woman might really shoot him. "You are not from the Mossad. Who are you? The CIA?" The man with the king cobra tattoo said. He was also speaking in English. With two Native Americans in front of him, it was not surprising for him to have such a guess. Charlotte said, "Do you want to live? Come with us. Answer my question." Sometimes the man with the eye tattoo was not tempted at all. It was not that he did not want freedom. To him, if these two Native Americans were from the CIA, then he would have jumped from a wolf's den to a tiger's den. "Bastard," Akiko Tsukino said angrily. "I took such a big risk to save you. What are you thinking?" The man with the king cobra tattoo glanced at Akiko Tsukino, then stared straight at Charlotte. He seemed to be making one last guess. Now is not the time to prove our identity and purpose. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch on his wrist. "We have 11 minutes left. In 11 minutes, we must retreat out of Holy Cross Street. I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. Either you come with me, or you stay here. But you should know that you will soon be taken away by the FA organization." 20 seconds left, Akiko Tsukino said. She was helping Charlotte time. "Humph." The man with the king cobra tattoo sneered. "You want to trick me? Haven't you played such a trick before? Have I ever been fooled?" Akiko Tsukino was about to scold him, but Charlotte stopped Akiko Tsukino. A man who had been imprisoned in prison and dungeon for too long, suffering from torture and all kinds of scams, would not easily trust anyone. "Boss, 30 seconds have passed." Akiko Tsukino looked at the multifunction watch on his wrist and reminded Charlotte. The person he was looking for was right in front of him, and Charlotte was certainly not willing to give up. He thought for a moment, suddenly reached out and rubbed his cheek twice, then took off a corner of the human skin mask, revealing a bit of his original skin. Before Charlotte spoke, the man with the king cobra tattoo said in surprise, "This? How did you get this kind of mask?" He did not speak in English, but in Chinese. Charlotte's heart moved. "Are you Chinese?" He also spoke in Chinese. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not answer Charlotte's question. He seemed very anxious. "Tell me, where did you get this kind of human skin mask?" Charlotte said, "I made it myself." The man with the king cobra tattoo suddenly became excited. "Who taught you?" "We'll talk about it after we get out. We don't have time," Charlotte said. "Okay, I'll go with you. Help me open these chains." The man with the king cobra tattoo finally made a decision. Charlotte used a tool to open the shackles on his feet and hands. It took him a total of 20 seconds to open the 4 locks, which was almost the same time as opening the key. With the ability of X-ray vision, he could clearly see the internal structure of the lock, so the process of opening the lock was naturally very easy. After opening the lock, Akiko Tsukino vigilantly looked at the man with the king cobra tattoo. As long as he made any move, she would not hesitate to make a move. But her worry was unnecessary. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not make any movement. He just moved his hands and feet, and then followed Charlotte to the door. Just as they walked to the door, Charlotte suddenly stopped. He raised his right hand and put up 2 fingers. Akiko Tsukino then flashed to the side of the iron and wood door. The Viper pistol in her hand was also raised to a position parallel to her collarbone. Charlotte's hand gesture was a tactical gesture for 2 people outside, and her movement was a posture of preparing to shoot the man in the head. Charlotte was also ready to fight. He stood on the other side of Akiko Tsukino, and in his hand was a Viper pistol with a silencer. The man with the king cobra tattoo did not wait for Charlotte to say anything. He returned to the grass, curled up, and pressed the chains that Charlotte had already opened under his body. He became a dead dog again. The 3 of them were all ready. The sound of footsteps and voices came from outside the door. The field agents have already gone to investigate. There's a problem with the optical fiber. Something like this has never happened before. A man's voice, speaking in Hebrew. This voice was not unfamiliar to Charlotte. He could already tell that it was Hard's voice. Another man's voice came. "Leader, do you suspect this is a premeditated attack?" Hard's voice said, "We have to be careful. The people of the FA organization are very cunning. Who can guarantee that they won't use other means to take that guy away?" Leader, I'll guard the door. Hard's subordinate walked to the iron and wood door and opened it with a key. The iron and wood door opened, and he pushed the door open, stepping in. The man with the king cobra tattoo, lying on the ground, entered his sight, just as he said he would. That guy was like a dead dog. This guy's like a pig. Hard's subordinate walked into the cell. Puff. Before Hard's subordinate noticed anything, a bullet went into his brain from the side. Blood and brain matter splattered out, splattering on Hard's face. Hard's reaction was extremely fast. His legs kicked the ground, and his body jerked backward. His body was still moving in the air, but his hand had already finished the action of pulling out the gun. He opened his mouth, about to warn the people on the ground. But the moment he opened his mouth, a figure flew out from the other side. Before he could see the person's face clearly, a bullet had already entered his mouth and then opened a hole in the back of his head. In the end, he still couldn't make a sound, nor could he fire a shot. Hard's body fell to the ground. Only then did Charlotte's body land, and he stood up again with a light push of his hands. Take the body, let's get out of here. Akiko, Sakino nodded, and then picked up the body of the Mossad agent that she had killed. Charlotte also picked up Hard's body. When he left, he even used his foot to wipe the blood on the ground a few times. If he had more time, he would have cleaned it up without leaving a trace, but he didn't have the time. The man with the king cobra tattoo also used his foot to wipe the blood on the cell, and then followed Charlotte and Akiko, Sakino, to the direction of the public bathroom. Just as the three of them turned the corner, the monitor in the corridor lit up with a green working light and started working normally. Mossad had already recovered the optical fiber fault. It was so fast that no one dared to believe it. After entering the public bathroom, Charlotte opened the manhole cover and threw Hard's body down. Akiko Tsukino also threw the body that she had brought out into the sewer. The three of them entered the sewer, and Charlotte was the last to enter the well, and he put the manhole cover back in place. There were traces in the cell, in the corridor, and even the manhole cover that had been pried open was a very obvious sign, but Charlotte didn't care anymore. The three of them entered the sewer, and the man with the king cobra tattoo kicked Hard's head a few times, venting his anger and resentment. Damn it, you're lucky. I'll find your family, and I'll make them come and accompany you. His words, as well as his ferocious expression, sent a chill down Charlotte's spine. We should go, Akiko Tsukino said coldly. The man with the king cobra tattoo kicked Hard's head again, and then left with Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. In the stinking sewage, Hard's head was already unrecognizable. The three of them were very fast, and in less than 2 minutes, they had passed through the 300-meter-long ancient sewer and arrived at the hole that had been blown up. Charlotte tossed the portable oxygen supply device to the man with the king cobra tattoo. Put on. There's no oxygen in the sewer. What about you? The man with the king cobra tattoo looked at Charlotte with a strange expression. Charlotte said, I can go 5 minutes without breathing. With that, he stepped over the hole and entered the sewer. Akiko Tsukino followed. The man with the king cobra tattoo said something that was almost inaudible. What's his relationship with him? Chapter 10:26. The manhole cover in the backyard of the building on Holy Cross Road moved a little and then lifted off the ground. Charlotte climbed out from under the manhole cover, followed by Akiko, Tsukino, and the man with the king cobra tattoo. Charlotte kicked the manhole cover back to its original position and then walked to the door of the backyard. There were still 2 minutes before the agreed time to retreat. The three of them had just walked out of the building and were walking towards the intersection of Holy Cross Road when an ear-piercing alarm suddenly sounded from 48, Holy Cross Road behind them. Charlotte looked back and saw the 2 Special Forces soldiers guarding the door running into the base. It was obvious that someone had gone to the dungeon and found that the prisoner had escaped. There was still blood on the ground, so the alarm was sounded. However, Kearns had taken most of the field agents with him, so there were fewer people in the base who could participate in the pursuit. Even the Special Forces soldiers guarding the door had been mobilized. However, this situation would only last for a few minutes. 5 minutes later, the Rapid Reaction Force stationed in Jerusalem would arrive. At that time, it would definitely not be a small-scale arrest operation. It would be a city-wide operation. Quick, quick, Charlotte urged. Akiko Tsukino and the man with the king cobra tattoo quickly followed. The man with the king cobra tattoo was wearing the clothes that Charlotte had taken off earlier. Otherwise, he would have become an eye-catching target. Just as the three of them reached the intersection, a Ford Raptor pickup truck stopped in front of them. The door opened and the three of them got in. Engumi Khan, who was driving, started the car and unhurriedly entered the road. Then, he sped up and drove forward. There were 6 people in the Ford Raptor pickup truck, so the space was a little cramped. Akiko Tsukino gave up her seat to Charlotte. She squatted in the gap between the sofa. Her plump butt rested on Charlotte's knee. She wanted to continue, but it was inconvenient for her to do so with the others in the car. Charlotte said, "It's hard for you to squat like this. It'll be troublesome if the traffic police find you. Why don't you sit on my lap?" Since Charlotte had spoken, how could Akiko Tsukino be polite? She sat on Charlotte's lap. The soft white ball was pressed against his thighs, and her slim and sexy little waist was pressed against Charlotte's lower abdomen. His sensitive parts were also invaded, and for a moment, all his senses were in a mess. At this critical moment, Akiko Tsukino's big white blob showed signs of restlessness. It kept squeezing backwards, squeezing, then releasing and squeezing again. However, it was not that he was deliberately provoking him at this time. Instead, the Ford Raptor pickup truck that Engumi Khan was driving drove into an old alley. The road surface of this alley was not asphalt or cement, but old stone bricks, and it was very bumpy. Under such circumstances, before the car had even passed through the alley, his things stood up, and he was furious for the beauty. Akiko Tsukino obviously knew the subtle changes in Charlotte's body, and the corners of her mouth secretly showed a trace of a smile. However, she quickly hid her smirk. She was the only one who knew the secret. She wouldn't tell anyone, and she didn't want anyone to find out about it. The Ford Raptor passed through the alley, and the road was finally flat. In front of them was a road around the city. It had 8 lanes, and cars were coming and going on the road. As soon as Engumi Khan drove the car into the road around the city, a long line of military off-road vehicles and armored vehicles roared from the opposite side. Several helicopters in the sky flew in the direction of Holy Cross Road. The helicopters did not fly at a high altitude, and the Israeli soldiers on the planes could be clearly seen. The Rapid Response Force stationed in Jerusalem was finally dispatched, and it was almost the same as the 5 minutes that Charlotte had expected. "Siamu, have you arranged a retreat route?" Charlotte asked aloud, and his voice broke the silent atmosphere in the car. Siamu said, "Boss, everything has been arranged. The Rapid Response Force stationed in Jerusalem will need 10 minutes to seal off Jerusalem. By then, we will have left the city. The people from Gaza will meet us outside the city." "Do they know who we are?" Charlotte asked. Siamu said, "Don't worry, boss. They only recognize money, not people. Didn't you say that the enemy of my enemy is my friend? In their eyes, we're their friends." "That's good," Charlotte said. He saw Siamu looking at Akiko Tsukino out of the corner of his eye, and there was sadness and loss in his eyes. He sighed in his heart, thinking that he would have a good talk with Siamu after this matter was over. Siamu liked Akiko Tsukino, and Akiko Tsukino didn't like Siamu, but liked him. He was already the husband of 4 wives and the father of 4 children. Their relationship was more than a simple triangle relationship. It was simply a heptagram relationship. It had long been messy. The root of the problem was that there was only a muddled wish account between him and Akiko Tsukino. He had no love for Akiko Tsukino at all. If he had to talk about feelings, the relationship between them was at most that of a family. A few minutes later, Engumi Khan drove the car out of the ring road, out of the interchange, and then drove in the direction of the suburbs. The Ford Raptor pickup truck had just left the ring road, and a minute later, the Jerusalem police blocked the road and set up checkpoints. Charlotte's plan was perfect. If they were delayed for even a minute, they would fall into a situation from which they could never recover. After entering the suburbs, everyone's mood suddenly relaxed. Simon made a phone call and then said, They're already waiting for us in the village ahead. We will get there in 10 minutes. Charlotte nodded and said, Later, everyone be alert. If they have any bad intentions, you know what to do. Engumi Khan said with a smile. Then kill them. Save your money. Sayama didn't say anything. He obviously didn't want that to happen, because he was the one who found them. If those people had bad intentions, he didn't know how to explain it to Charlotte. Charlotte didn't know what Sayama was thinking. He said, Don't think too much, Sayama. Even if something happens, it has nothing to do with you. Well, let's find a time to have a good talk. Sayama smiled at Charlotte. He seemed to know what Charlotte wanted to talk to him about. A few minutes later, the car entered a small country road, and the road was bumpy again. Charlotte's worries appeared again. He had now become Akiko, Tsukino's human sofa. The more uneven the road, the more Akiko Tsukino's big white ball would squeeze and harass him. And his part had not lowered its head since Akiko Tsukino sat on him. Sometimes, the man with the king cobra tattoo didn't speak from the beginning. He observed everyone in the car and seemed to be thinking about something. Charlotte had a lot of questions to ask him, but now was not the time to ask questions, so he didn't talk to the man with the king cobra tattoo. A few minutes later, the car entered a village. It was an Arab village. In Israel, not all people were Jews. There were also a small number of Arabs. They lived in the cracks. Under Sayama's guidance, Engumi Khan drove the Ford Raptor pickup truck into a farmyard. Before the car stopped, 4 Arab men came out of the house. They were holding AK-47s in their hands and had thick beards. At first glance, it was obvious that they were the kind of people who were not afraid of death. Akiko Tsukino pulled out her gun. Charlotte grabbed her hand. Don't be impulsive. Let's observe first. Akiko Tsukino nodded and put away her Viper pistol. Sayama got out of the car and went to negotiate with the 4 armed men. At this time, the man with the king cobra tattoo said, These guys are militants from the Gaza Strip. They're not moderate. Be careful of them. Charlotte said, You've been in the dungeon for so long. Do you still recognize these people? The man with the king cobra tattoo said, Of course I don't know them, but their weapons have their insignia. I recognize their insignia. Saleh shifted his gaze to take a look. Sure enough, he saw a pattern of stars and the moon on the AK-47 of the Arab armed man. In his heart, he had a new understanding of the man with the Eye King snake tattoo. Although this guy had been locked up in the dungeon for a long time, he had never given up, and his strength had not weakened by much. What was certain was that as long as he was given a gun, he could become a cold-blooded killer in the blink of an eye. Sayama quickly finished negotiating with the 4 Arab men. He turned and said, Get out of the car. It's done. The people in the car opened the door and got out. One of the Arab men waved his hand and said in Arabic, Follow me. Don't talk or ask questions. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Charlotte and his men followed the 4 Arab armed men into a room. It was a very simple dormitory. The armed man who had spoken just now lifted a piece of Persian-style carpet and revealed a wooden plank. He lifted the plank, and under it was the entrance to a tunnel. Palestine had been completely blockaded by Israel, and the Gaza Strip lacked doctors and medicine. This also made the people of the Gaza Strip practice the ability to dig tunnels. It was not surprising that the people in the Gaza Strip could dig a tunnel into Egypt, but it was unprecedented for them to dig a tunnel into Israel. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Charlotte would not have believed it. Put on a mask. An Arab militant threw a few black balaclavas on the ground. His expression was ferocious, and his tone was fierce. Also, take out your weapons. Charlotte frowned and said in Arabic, What do you mean? We paid you $40 million US, and this is what you get in exchange for services like this? I can hire 4,000 people like you. Be ****. The Arab armed man raised a rifle in his hand and smashed it down. Charlotte did not move, but Akiko Tsukino had already cut in front of him. Although she did not have a gun in her hand, she had a shuriken. Stop! At this critical moment, the leading Arab armed man reached out and grabbed his men's guns. They are not our enemies. People in the Middle East hated Americans, and the Indians were unjustly implicated. Anyone who knew American history knew that Americans killed the Indians more ruthlessly than anyone else. They almost caused the Indians to go extinct. The leading Arab armed man said, "Sir, I'm sorry. This is our strategic tunnel. We have our rules. Please cooperate. It's fine if you don't hand over your weapons, but please put on a mask." Sima looked at Charlotte. He could not make such a decision. In fact, he was already a little ashamed. Charlotte had given him $40 million to do this for him, but Charlotte obviously did not get the kind of service he wanted. Charlotte said, "No problem. We can put on a mask." Charlotte took the lead to put on a mask and then pretended to feel his way into the tunnel. After him, Akiko, Tsukino, and Saimu also put on a mask and went into the tunnel one by one. Chapter 10:27. The tunnel was very narrow, but it was barely passable. Two Arab militants walked in front to lead the way, and the leader and the other walked behind. Xiao Lei and his men walked in the middle. He was not affected by the black headgear, but the others were affected, and their walking speed was not fast. From time to time, Xiao Lei would turn around to look at the two armed Arabs behind him, observing their movements. But he was not worried that they would do something here. Because of the $40 million he promised to pay, $20 million would only be paid after he left Jerusalem safely. $20 million was a huge sum of money for an armed group like them. They had to get it no matter what. After walking for about 100 meters, the tunnel widened a lot. Charlotte saw a simple railway track and iron boxes installed on the track to transport goods. Obviously, this tunnel was a tunnel for armed groups in the Gaza Strip to transport people and equipment to Jerusalem. It was also a channel for armed groups in the Gaza Strip to transport important goods from Jerusalem to the Gaza Strip. "Go up, you will soon arrive in the Gaza Strip," the leader of the Arab militants said. Charlotte clearly saw the iron box on the track, but he said, "Go up what? Where to?" The two Arab militants in front turned around. One of them hit the iron box with the butt of his gun and said rudely, "This is a carriage. Climb up. Hurry up." "Oh, I know." Charlotte reached out his hand like a blind man. When he touched the big iron box, he carefully climbed up. After him, Akiko, Tsukino, and Angyumi Khan also climbed into the carriage. For Arab militants also climbed into the carriage. Then the leaders started the electric device, and the iron box moved forward. It was very fast, almost 50 kilometers per hour. In the carriage, an Arab militant put his head close to the leader's ear, and his voice was almost inaudible. But he did not know that there was a pair of eyes looking at his mouth through the black headgear. "Boss, are we going to let them go after we get the rest of the money?" The leader sneered, and his voice was almost inaudible. "They're willing to pay $40 million just for this retreat. They're not ordinary fat sheep. After we get out, we can kidnap them together with our men. I think we can earn a few $100 million from that Native American. Apart from the sugar daddy, do I still need to teach you that? Get rid of the others. We don't need that many people." The leader said. The Arab militant who asked the question nodded and didn't say anything else. Xiao Lei retracted his gaze and suddenly said in Mandarin, "Oh no, I actually forgot my safe in the hotel in Jerusalem. There's $1 million in that safe and $5 million worth of diamonds in it." The members of the Zodiac squad immediately shifted their attention to Charlotte. Of course, they knew what Charlotte was talking about, but no one remembered that he had a lockbox, let alone $1 million and a diamond worth $5 million. "Hey, what are you talking about?" the leader asked warily. Charlotte said in Chinese, "I'm talking about my money, dollars and diamonds. They're worth $6 million. I left them in the hotel in Jerusalem." "Speak in Arabic." The leader's eyes turned cold. Charlotte said in Arabic, "I said I left a lockbox in a hotel in Jerusalem. It contains $1 million in diamonds worth $5 million. Hearing this, the leader's jaw almost dropped to the ground. Charlotte sighed and said, "Forget it. It's only $6 million. It's not even enough to play a card game in Las Vegas. Can you tell me which hotel room it is in?" The leader said, "I can ask my men to get it for you." "Really?" Charlotte didn't believe him. "Of course, but you have to give us a 50% commission," the leader said. Charlotte smiled. "Of course, it's not bad if I can get $3 million back. My room is on the top floor of the Hilton Hotel, room 408. I put my room card in the hotel's locker." It's a locked box, and the password to open it is 908,912. There's also a limited edition Patek Philippe watch in the box. That's my favorite. Please bring it back to me." The members of the Zodiac squad were stunned. They knew that Charlotte was lying, but they didn't know why Charlotte would tell such a lie. The leader stopped the iron box and said to his men, "You take one person back to the Hilton Hotel and get it back." "Yes." The Arab armed man followed and got out of the car. The armed man in front also jumped out of the iron box one step ahead of his companions. It was obviously a lucrative job, so of course they had to do it. After the two armed men got out of the car, the leader turned on the electric device, and the iron box continued to move forward. The tunnel was still long, and there was no end to it. One by one, the cheap white light bulbs passed by. Sitting in a big metal box in such a tunnel was like passing through a tunnel of time to go to hell and live in peace and contentment. Akiko Tsukino quietly leaned her head on Charlotte's shoulder, but she didn't say anything. Charlotte seemed to notice something. He reached out and put his arm around her shoulder, and the two of them looked very intimate. This scene fell into the eyes of the leader behind, but he didn't have any reaction. After all, in his eyes, Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino were both Native Americans, and it was very likely that they were a couple. It was normal for them to be a little intimate. The big iron box moved forward for some distance. The leader looked away from Charlotte and Akiko Tsukino. Just when the leader looked away, Akiko Tsukino said in a voice that only Charlotte could hear, "Do these guys want to kill us? Is that why you tricked two of us?" Charlotte's voice was also very faint. "Yes, they want to kidnap us." The leader also said that he wanted to kill you and only leave me the gold mine. "I know these guys are not reliable. I really don't know how Sayama does things," Akiko Tsukino said with some dissatisfaction. Charlotte said, "Don't blame him. Time is limited, and it's not easy for him to do this. Those guys are greedy for money, and people like them are not worthy of trust." "Then what should we do?" "Count to 3. I will kill the one behind, and you kill the one in front," Charlotte said. "Okay," Akiko Tsukino responded. 1. When counting, Charlotte's hand slipped to his waist and took out a military knife. Akiko Tsukino also had a shuriken in her hand. 2, 3. When he counted to 3, Charlotte suddenly turned around and fiercely stabbed the leader with a military knife in his hand. However, before Charlotte's military knife stabbed into the leader's body, the man with the king cobra tattoo, sitting next to the leader, suddenly chopped the leader's neck with his palm. It's not that Charlotte's speed wasn't as fast as him, but he simply made a move first than Charlotte. The leader groaned, and his body fell out of the iron box. But before he fell, the man with the king cobra tattoo suddenly grabbed his head and twisted it in the opposite direction. Kacha! The leader's cervical vertebra broke like a sugar cane, and his head drooped down. The man with the king cobra tattoo gently pushed, and the leader fell out of the iron box. The AK-47 in his hand also fell into the hands of the man with the king cobra tattoo. At that moment, Charlotte was a little nervous, but he didn't stop the man with the king cobra tattoo. Because he could feel that, although the man with the king cobra tattoo had a gun in his hand, he didn't intend to attack anyone. He just laid the AK-47 flat on his knee and even let go of his hand without taking it. On the other side, Akiko Tsukino did her job neatly. At the moment when Charlotte counted to 3, Akiko Tsukino stabbed the back of the head of the armed Arab sitting in front of him with the poisonous shuriken in his hand. With such a stab, even if it wasn't poisonous, he would have died, not to mention it was dipped in poison. Sayama, Engumi Khan, and Yelena took off the black cloth on their heads. Their faces didn't have the slightest expression of surprise. Although they didn't see what just happened, they knew what happened. Charlotte stopped the iron box. Sayama spoke. His face was full of shame. "Boss, I'm sorry, I screwed up. These guys, they lied to me." Charlotte patted Sayama's shoulder. "Don't blame yourself. You've tried your best. If it were me, I would have done the same. These guys don't have any humanity at all. When they encountered such an opportunity to make a lot of money, they would abandon all morals." "Boss, Although Charlotte said so, Sayama still felt ashamed. All right, don't mention this again in the future. Charlotte changed the topic. I guess we'll get out of this tunnel soon. Those guys have reinforcements. When we get out later, don't hesitate to kill them immediately. I want that 20 million back, Siamu said hatefully. Money isn't important. After killing them, we'll leave immediately. Charlotte said, 20 million US dollars? In the eyes of ordinary people, this amount of money was definitely a crazy number. But in the eyes of Charlotte, it was probably only a few $100s. If he wanted money, even if he didn't take it from the Rema Group's account, he could get it from the U.S. stock market. The man with the king cobra tattoo, said, "Can I use a gun?" Charlotte said, "Of course you can." The man with the king cobra tattoo nodded and didn't say anything. Charlotte said, "Friend, we spent so much to save you. We don't have any malicious intentions, nor do we have any purpose against you. I only have one purpose, which is to find out the truth of some things. So, don't leave alone." This was a very polite warning. The man with the king cobra tattoo nodded again and still didn't say anything. In fact, he also wanted to find out something from Charlotte, so even if Charlotte didn't mention it, he wouldn't leave alone. Chapter 1028. The escape car moved forward, and light appeared in front of it. It was the exit of the tunnel, and Jerusalem had been left behind. Before the big metal box left the tunnel exit, there were figures at the tunnel exit. They blocked the light from the tunnel entrance, and they were all holding weapons in their hands. Charlotte could still see clearly that it wasn't natural light. It was light, just a little brighter. Although he hadn't seen the situation on the ground, Charlotte had already visualized a scene in his mind. There was a dilapidated courtyard on the ground, and its owner was an honest Arab. There was an entrance to the tunnel in his dormitory, which was covered with wooden boards and cheap carpets. At the moment, there were several armed men from the Gaza Strip standing next to the entrance. Charlotte said, "There are two people at the end of the tunnel, and they're holding AK-47 rifles. Don't touch them first. There's still people on the ground. Let's go up first." The people in the metal box all nodded. "Then I don't need it for the time being. With it, those guys will be more vigilant." The man with the king cobra tattoo threw the AK-47 on the track behind him. From his point of view, if he had an AK-47 in his hand, he would feel more secure. However, he threw it away without hesitation. A smile appeared on Charlotte's face. The man with the king cobra tattoo had already shown his trust in him and the members of the Zodiac Squad. It was a good start. When the big metal box was near the end of the tunnel, Charlotte took out 2 bundles of US dollars from his equipment bag. He said, loudly in Arabic, "My friends in front, God bless you." His voice was very loud, and he waved the US dollars in his hand. Obviously, money was more useful than words. As for him, he was just short of writing the word vote on his forehead. The 2 armed Arabs at the end of the tunnel raised their guns, but it was just a precautionary action. Charlotte's eyes were locked on them. As soon as their fingers showed any signs of pulling the trigger, he would take the initiative, and everyone around him had the ability to do that. In front of the Zodiac Squad, the 2 armed Arabs were no different from child soldiers. The metal box stopped. An Arab militant asked, "Where are our men?" Charlotte said, "One of my suitcases was left in a room at the Hilton Hotel in Jerusalem. There were $1 million in diamonds worth $5 million. They went to get them." Charlotte didn't know if the 2 guys who returned to Jerusalem had any contact with the terrorists here, and he didn't care about it either. The reason he said this was because he didn't want to bother making up a new story. "I'll immediately contact our people to confirm it. If you're lying, you know the consequences." The Arab militant who spoke took out a mobile phone. Akiko Tsukino moved her hand forward from behind. Charlotte grabbed her hand and whispered in Chinese, "Don't worry, this is the tunnel. The broken phones in their hands won't have any signal." Akiko Tsukino nodded and put her hand back in place. Sure enough, the militant who made the phone call changed positions several times, but there was no signal. Charlotte threw the 2 bundles of dollars in his hand over. "My friends, go up and make the call. There will only be signal on the surface. This is my gift to you. Long live Allah." The two armed Arab men took the money and looked at each other with smiles on their faces. One of them said, "Follow me." One of the two Arab militants took the lead to climb the iron ladder to the surface, and the other guarded behind. Charlotte and the others climbed the iron ladder one after another. When they reached the surface, Charlotte saw a dilapidated house. There were 10 armed Arab militants standing in the house. There was also a bed, and the quilt on the bed was dirty. The bed was the only piece of furniture in the room. The members of the Zodiac Squad and the man with the King Cobra tattoo also climbed out of the tunnel and came to the house. Charlotte had a smile on his face. "My friends, kneel!" the commander of the militants suddenly shouted. Charlotte spread out his hands. "What's going on?" Without waiting for Charlotte to say another word, the commander suddenly hit Charlotte's head with the handle of his gun. Charlotte tilted his head, and his right hand cut into the empty space in front of the commander's chest. His right palm first poked the commander's heart, then suddenly turned into a fist and hit the commander's heart again. The whole process from start to finish only took a second. A second later, the commander let out a blood-curdling scream. Under the huge impact, his body was lifted off the ground. He flew a full 2 meters before crashing into the wall and falling down. Gunshots rang out, but they weren't fired by the Arab militants, but by the members of the Zodiac Squad. The Viper pistols, which were all equipped with silencers, quickly took lives. The most exaggerated one was Akiko Tsukino, who didn't use a gun. Just as Charlotte attacked the commander, she suddenly waved her hands, and 4 Arab militants in front of her fell to the ground. Each of their foreheads had a 3-leaf shuriken. The man with the King Cobra tattoo used a new way of killing. When Xia Lei made his move, he suddenly retreated and crashed into the arms of one of the armed men behind him. It was also during this process that his finger reached between the trigger of the AK-47 and blocked the man's path of firing. After that, he pulled out a dagger from a man's waist and began to stab the man's chest. He stabbed again and again until the others had killed their targets, but he was still stabbing. The battle ended in 1 or 2 seconds. In fact, it shouldn't be called a battle, but rather a massacre. Only then did the man with the King Cobra tattoo stop. He let go of the Arab militant he stabbed. There were at least 20 bloody holes on the guy's body. The frequency at which he stabbed was so fast that people couldn't follow the trajectory of the knife. In a total of 1 or 2 seconds, he stabbed the man more than 20 times. "We should go," Charlotte said. Walking out of the room, there was a yard outside the door with 2 Great Wall pickup trucks. It was surprising to see China's domestic cars in the Gaza Strip. However, in the Middle East, Great Wall pickup trucks were very popular because they could be converted into tanks with heavy machine guns, and they were cheap. Charlotte opened the yard door and saw Gaza City in the distance. It was the largest city in Palestine, but it didn't look like a big city at all. There were traces of shelling and bombing everywhere. Siamu came to Charlotte's side. "Boss, we need to go through Gaza into Egypt, and then take a plane from Egypt back to China." "To Egypt? We'll leave in their car," Charlotte said. "Let's go now." A minute later, 2 Great Wall pickup trucks drove out of the yard and headed in the direction of Gaza. The car that Charlotte was in was driven by Yelena, and Akiko Tsukino sat in the passenger seat. He and the man with the King Cobra tattoo sat on the sofa in the back seat. This arrangement wasn't because he wanted to avoid Siamu and Angumi Khan, but because he needed a space to talk. "Can you tell me your name?" Charlotte broke the silence in the car while the car was driving. "I'm telling you my real name, not a fake one." The man with the King Cobra tattoo was silent for a moment. "What's your name? Also, take off the human skin mask on your face. I want to see what you really look like." Akiko Tsukino turned around and looked coldly at the man with the King Cobra tattoo. She was very dissatisfied with his attitude. Charlotte didn't want to comply with his request, but he knew that the guy in front of him was not an ordinary person. Mossad had locked him up in the dungeon and tortured him for so many years, but he couldn't pry open his mouth. If he didn't show some sincerity, he wouldn't open his mouth. Charlotte reached out and rubbed his face a few times. Then he took off the human skin mask on his face, revealing his original appearance. The man with the King Cobra tattoo was stunned the moment he saw Charlotte's real face. His eyes were also very special. His reaction touched a sensitive nerve in Charlotte because his observation skills were the best in the entire human race. He had some guesses in his heart. This guy was the first person to get the AE capsule. Later, the AE capsule fell into the hands of the Americans, and my father stole it. Also, this guy obviously knows the structure of the pyramid. My father left me a message, and he knows the pyramid like the back of his hand. This is the first time he's seen me, but his eyes are so strange. Has he seen me somewhere before? Does he know my father? Does he have something to do with my father? Just as Charlotte was thinking about these questions, the man with the king cobra tattoo suddenly said, "Your surname is Xia, and your name is Charlotte." With just this one sentence, Xia Lei's head exploded with a boom, as if someone had thrown a grenade into his brain. "Well, I'll answer your question." The man with the king cobra tattoo said, "My surname is Qianjun. This name was very imposing. He was Chinese, and the surname Qian was a very rare surname in China." How do you know my name?" Charlotte recovered from the shock. "I know your father. I've been to your house once. I've seen you, but you haven't seen me," Qianjun said. Not knowing why, Charlotte suddenly thought of a person that his father, Xia Changhe, had always refused to tell him: snakes. He thought of snakes, but it was definitely not because of the king cobra tattoo on Qianjun's arm. They were both members of the Zodiac team, but Akiko Tsukino, who was a rat, did not have a rat tattoo on her body, and Yelena did not have a chicken tattoo on her body. Therefore, the tattoo was definitely not the reason why he made this guess. The reason why he made this guess was that Qianjun was the first person to get the AE capsule, and his father, Xia Changhe, knew the structure of the pyramid like the back of his hand. "Are you guessing my relationship with your father?" Qianjun also looked straight at Xia Lei. There was no longer any vigilance in his eyes. Instead, there was a kind of excitement. Charlotte said, "You were a snake?" Qianjun nodded. Even Yelena, who was driving, couldn't help but look back at Qianjun. Akiko Tsukino was also very surprised. No one else in the Zodiac team had ever seen a snake, but they didn't expect that the person they saved in Jerusalem would be a snake. Chapter 1029. An hour ago, on the outskirts of Jerusalem, on a barren hill. The hill was originally 500 or 600 meters high, but now its height had been reduced by half. At the top of this barren hill, a large group of people were observing and looking for something. This group of people was the exploration team formed by Mossad and the FA organization. For Kearns, he had been to this place countless times, but for Yin FO and Augustman, this was the first time. "This is the place," Kearns said. "Back then, our archaeologist went missing in this area, along with 2 archaeologists from the United States." Yin FO looked into the distance and said, "This place is very wide, but with your strength, you haven't found the place where the AE capsule was found after so many years?" As he spoke, Kearns's gaze shifted to the direction of the foot of the hill. He saw a construction team heading in this direction. The construction machinery of the construction team were all military construction machinery, separated by some distance. Although he couldn't clearly see the situation of the construction team, he could guess that it was the Israeli military's engineers. The question he asked actually already had an answer, and that was under their feet. There was no earthquake, but a mountain had inexplicably collapsed in half. In fact, this was already a very obvious answer. The reason why he still asked was because he really didn't believe that after so many years, Israel had not discovered this place. Kearns said, "I know what you're thinking in your heart, but what I want to tell you is that our people have explored this place 10 times. But do you know why they still haven't found it?" Yin Fo's gaze shifted to Kearns. "Mr. Kearns, you can tell me the answer directly." Kearns frowned. "Mr. Yin, this area has a special magnetic field, and all exploration equipment will be useless. Sometimes the magnetic field will also point our explorers in the wrong place, wasting time and energy. Let me tell you, once our people explored a place, which was also a mountain, our exploration equipment told our explorers that the interior of the mountain was empty, and there was a triangular space. It was very magical." Augustman's gaze shifted from the construction team to Kearns. He looked interested. Mr. Kearns, what's the result? Kearns smiled bitterly and shook his head. That time, we were cheated badly. We used a large number of construction machines and construction troops, and we began to excavate the mountain. We were like construction workers building roads and tunnels. It took us nearly a year to dig through the whole mountain, but we couldn't find any triangular space. Later, the results of the instrument returned to normal. There was nothing but soil and rocks on the mountain. Yin, Fo, and Augustman could not help but look at each other. Kern's explanation was a little absurd, but for some reason, they believed it. What other reason could there be to explain why Israel had not found the right place for so many years? What kind of magnetic field was a magnetic field that could render the detector ineffective and even give an idiotic result? Poor Israel. Sometimes, when they were excited to discover the location of the hidden treasure, they would start to dig and dig, only to find that they had been fooled by something in the end. Not to mention how many times they had experienced such a thing. Even experiencing it once was unbearable. Kearns continued, "We have been cheated time and time again, and each time we have suffered heavy losses. You asked me why Israel had not found the right place for so many years, and this is the reason. For so many years, we have found the right place every day, but if we were to dig according to those results, we would probably be able to fill in a new Israel in the Pacific Ocean." Of course, this was an exaggeration, but it was the truth, even if it made people not know whether to laugh or cry. Now that we have found the right place without the use of instruments, it is right under our feet, right? Yin Fo had his own observations and judgment. This mountain has mysteriously collapsed. It might be the place we are looking for, but who can say for sure that it is not a trick? That magnetic field has fooled us many times. Who can guarantee that it won't fool us again? Kearns said he was obviously afraid of being fooled, to the point that even though the truth was right in front of him, he did not dare to believe it. I have a feeling that this is the place. Under our feet is the place where we found the AE capsule. Yin Fo said. Augustman said that mysterious magnetic field might be related to this mountain. Have you never explored this place before? Kearns shook his head. No, but there is nothing. Augustman revealed a confident smile. Then I'm also sure that it is this mountain. I really want to know what is hidden in this mountain to be able to produce such a magical magnetic field. From your description, I think it is a bad boy that likes to play pranks. It is right under your feet, but it is pointing you to another place. Let's hope so, Kearns said. This is also the reason why we sent the engineering team to dig. Let's hope that we can find the truth this time. Yin Fo said, Mr. Kearns, how about I make a bet with you? Bet? Kearns frowned. What do you want to bet with me? Yin Fo smiled and said, I bet that I will find the answer before you. The bet is that when your engineering team excavates this place, I will be able to go in and take a look. Kearns snorted softly. Mr. Yin, I know that you mean to find the answer from that guy, but I don't think you will succeed. That guy is the person who can endure the most pain I have ever seen. No matter how we torture him, he will not say a single word. Since you are so confident that you can find the answer from him, fine, I will make this bet with you. The bet is that you will leave Israel in the future and never come back. Yin Fo smiled. That is very fair. Deal. Do. At this moment, Kearns' phone rang. Kearns picked up the phone. Hello, it's me. What? Kearns' violent reaction made Yin Fo and Augustman look at each other. Both of them had a bad feeling at the same time. How could something like this happen? You idiots. Kearns was furious. He shouted at the phone in his hand. Chase after him immediately. Not enough people. Be ****. Don't you know how to contact the rapid response team? Get them to come and help immediately. Also, inform the police to lock down Jerusalem. I will rush back immediately. You better lock onto the target before I return. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Although Kearns did not mention the prisoner, Yin Fo and Augustman already knew what had happened. The two of them rushed to Israel from the United States with the CIA boss, Williams, an important person in the White House on their mission. But before the two of them could do anything, the extremely important prisoner had already been kidnapped. I believe you have already guessed what happened. After ending the call, Kearns had a solemn expression. His eyes were also burning with anger. Then what are we waiting for? Let's hurry back. Yenfo seemed to be even more anxious than Kearns. What's the use of being anxious now? The helicopter is already on the way. We will arrive in Jerusalem in 8 minutes. Kearns looked in the direction of Jerusalem. Although he did not see any helicopters, he believed that the Israeli Rapid Response Team's helicopter had already taken off and was on its way. Driving back was obviously not as fast as taking a helicopter. Yenfo did not rush him. He probed. Who do you suspect did it? Kearns shook his head. There is no confirmed suspect. The other party entered through the ancient drainage system of Jerusalem. There are very, very few people who know that secret. They're not one person. They have an extremely detailed plan. They split up the work. Someone cut off our optical cables. Someone hired Arabs from the Gaza Strip to cause trouble and divert our people's attention. The person responsible for the rescue entered through the ancient drainage system. He was one of us. He took him away and then killed Hader and a field agent. Yenfo frowned. We just left, and the other party already made such a high-level operation. Moreover, the plan was so detailed. This means that we have been under their surveillance all this time, and we actually did not notice it. Augustman also said, monitoring the Mossad's Jerusalem base and us. Then, directly attacking the Mossad's Jerusalem base. Even the Delta Force of the United States and the KGB can't do something like this. Then, who else has the ability to do it? Who do you think was responsible for and planned this operation? Yenfo was slightly stunned. I know who you're talking about. This operation is indeed like that person's method, but Augustman said, but he is dead. Kearns glanced at Yenfo and then looked at Augustman. You're talking about Charlotte? Yenfo and Augustman did not speak, but their expressions and their silence were already an answer. Yes, Charlotte, a person who single-handedly sneaked into the United States, infiltrated the Lockheed Martin Corporation headquarters to steal secrets, and then slaughtered the elite armed personnel of the FA organization at the Mexican border to steal the Predator B drone. He came and went in the United States like there was no one there. His cases were far more than the one in the United States. In Japan, in France, in Italy, if there is an operation in the world that the Delta Force of the United States and the Russian KGB could not complete, and this kind of thing really happened, then please point the line of suspicion at Charlotte. If there is an espionage operation in the world that the CIA and the Mossad could not handle, and this kind of espionage really happened and succeeded, then please point the line of suspicion at Charlotte. Charlotte, he is the king of the spy world. That's impossible. Kearns said, we have confirmed that Charlotte has been assassinated by the CIA. Yenfo smiled bitterly. That guy is best at deceiving people. No matter what you see about him, you have to maintain an attitude of suspicion. Looks like I have to make a trip to China myself. A helicopter appeared in the sky. It was 2 minutes slower than Kearns expected. Israel's rapid reaction force sometimes had its moments. Chapter 10:30. 2 Great Wall pickup trucks entered Gaza City, then stopped at a less crowded road. Charlotte and his men walked through a street, then came to the door of an Arabic-style building. Siamu, don't make any more mistakes this time, or I'll cut off your D***CK. Akiko Tsukino said fiercely into Siamu's ear. Siamu subconsciously clamped his legs together, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. The woman he loved another man, and that man was someone he could never surpass in this lifetime. But now she said she would cut off his D***CK. He really felt terrible. Siamu stretched out his hand and knocked on the door. 2 seconds later, he knocked on the door 3 more times. This seemed to be a code to prove his identity. A little while after he knocked on the door opened. An Arabian woman wearing a black veil appeared at the door. She looked very sexy, with big breasts and a perky butt. She was also very tall. Although she was wearing a black veil, the first impression people would have of her was that she was young and beautiful. Charlotte had already seen her real face. It was a typical Arabian woman's face, with a high nose and deep eye sockets. Her eyes were like blue gems, deep and beautiful. He noticed the way she looked at Siamu. Her eyes were full of affection and joy. Charlotte smiled slightly. This Arabian woman was Siamu's lover. Sure enough, when she saw that the person who knocked on the door was Siamu, the Arabian woman was stunned for a moment. Then she threw herself into Siamu's arms and affectionately called Siamu's name. "Yada, let's talk inside," Siamu said. He was very embarrassed, especially in front of Akiko Tsukino. The woman called Yada obediently let go of Siamu and opened the door wide, inviting Charlotte and the others in. That guy is a playboy by nature. He gets a lot of information from his women. Akiko Tsukino said to Charlotte as she walked beside Charlotte. The smile on Charlotte's face became even more obvious. Now that things had changed like this, the knot in his heart was finally untied. If Siamu was the kind of man who was single-minded and unforgettable in love, it would really be difficult for him to untie the knot in Siamu's heart. But Siamu was the kind of universal love man. He had women in the Gaza Strip, so he must have women in other places. He built his intelligence network this way, his women gathering information for him and managing his informants. For such a killer in the field of love, did he still need to worry that he had a knot in his heart that couldn't be untied? Yada brewed a few cups of Damascene rose tea and invited Charlotte and the others to have some. Siamu didn't introduce Charlotte to his woman. After Yada brewed the tea, he called her out. "Let's go out too," Yelena said. She knew that Charlotte and Qianjun needed a space to talk. Akiko Tsukino and Angyumi Khan also left the living room. Only Charlotte and Qianjun were left in the living room. The two of them didn't immediately start talking and remained silent. However, this silence was just a preparation for the conversation that was about to start. Charlotte needed to organize the questions he wanted to find answers from Qianjun, and Qianjun also seemed to be thinking about questions related to Charlotte. After about 3 minutes of silence, Charlotte said, "You know what I want to know the most? The secret of the AE capsule. Tell me, how did you know about the existence of the AE capsule back then? And how did you know where it was?" Qianjun said, "Your father. The only answer I can give you is your father." Charlotte said, "My father is the founder of the Zodiac team. I understand that he asked you to snatch the AE capsule, but this is not the answer I want. His father, Xia Changhe, had too many secrets, but if his father wanted to tell him, he would have told him long ago. Why did he have to wait until today to ask Qianjun?" Qianjun looked at Charlotte, his eyes burning. "Didn't your father tell you?" Charlotte smiled bitterly. "If he told me, would I still ask you?" After a pause, he said, "I didn't have the chance to ask him even if I wanted to. He's not by my side." Charlotte had his reasons for adding the last sentence. The first reason was that although he rescued Qianjun from the Mossad base, he didn't think that Qianjun would be loyal to him like Akiko Tsukino or Siamu. Qianjun was the most powerful soldier under his father, Xia Changhe. His strength was above all the members of the Zodiac team. He had never acted with other members of the Zodiac team. During this period of time, he didn't even take the initiative to contact any of the members of the Zodiac team. He was indifferent to the members of the Zodiac team, and he didn't care about them at all. The second reason was because of his father, Xia Changhe. His father definitely knew where Qianjun was, but his father had never told him, not even the slightest hint. His father not only hid it from his son, but also from the members of the Zodiac team, except Snake. Why did God do this? This puzzled him and also made him suspicious. Qianjun was silent for a long time, and then said, "If he wanted to tell you, he would have told you. There must be a reason why he didn't want to tell you. Do you want me to go against his will?" Charlotte frowned. "Even if he didn't want to tell me, you don't want to tell me either? I'm the leader of the Zodiac team now, and I think I have the right to know these secrets." Qianjun said, "I knew this day would come. When I saw you, you were still in school. Dad said that you would be a miracle in this world, and I believed him. Now, I believe him even more. Why are you avoiding my question? Your father? How about this? After seeing your father, if he agrees, I'll tell you everything I know," said Qianjun. A trace of anger rose in Charlotte's heart. He risked his life to rescue him with the members of the Zodiac team. He was full of expectations that he could get the answer from Qianjun, But he didn't expect that Qianjun would have such an attitude. He also understood one thing, and that was between him and his father, Xia Chang'e, Snake of the Zodiac team, was actually loyal to his father. Don't blame me. I have my own difficulties. Qianjun avoided Charlotte's eyes. He didn't know why, but when facing an angry Charlotte, he, the strongest member of the Zodiac team, actually felt fear in his heart. You can go, Charlotte said. What? Qianjun was stunned, and he suspected that he heard wrong. Charlotte said, I said you can go. Do you hear me clearly? You want to drive me away? I saved you, and I did it willingly. I really want to know the answer to those questions, but I won't force you. You're free. You can go find my father, and you can do whatever you want. From now on, everything about you has nothing to do with me. There's no such person as Snake in the Zodiac team, and if there is, it won't be you. Charlotte said. The atmosphere in the living room suddenly became awkward. Qianjun never thought that Charlotte would drive him away without saying a word. He didn't even want to give him a little time. In fact, he had already made it very clear that after seeing his father, he would ask for his father's opinion and then tell Charlotte. But now Charlotte wanted to drive him away. Why? Charlotte interrupted Qianjun's words. I'll give you some time, right? Qianjun nodded. Charlotte didn't show any mercy. I don't have time for you, and I don't have much time left. Also, I won't leave a person with a secret by my side, whether this secret is kept by my father or not. The current Zodiac team is not the Zodiac team of the past. We're like a family, and you're a stranger to me, Akiko, and Angumi-kan. You said you don't have much time left. What do you mean? Qianjun didn't want to leave. Charlotte just looked at him, and he didn't want to answer any of his questions. The living room fell into silence and awkwardness again. A minute later, Qianjun shrugged. You're forcing me to choose between you and your father. He's the old king, and you're the new king. Should I, a general, be loyal to you, the new king? Or should I be loyal to the old king? You're overcomplicating the problem. I believe that my father must have his reasons for hiding it from me, but I'll find the answer myself, Charlotte said. I'm from Wuxi County, Jiaozuo, Hunan. My father passed away when I was very young, and my mother remarried. She abandoned me. At that time, your father appeared in front of me, and I still remember the scene to this day. It was raining that day, and I curled up under the bridge, cold and hungry. No one pitied me, and they walked past me without even looking at me. I thought I would starve to death, so I swore that if someone gave me a steam bun, I would repay him when I grew up and had the ability. Chapter 10:31. There was silence in the living room. Charlotte was a little nervous. He had used provocation to force Qianjun to tell the secret in his heart, which was equivalent to forcing him to go against the will of his father, Xia Chang'e. This was really difficult for a person like Qianjun. He was worried that Qianjun would eventually give up and choose to leave. Now, after Qianjun told the story between him and his father, Xia Chang'e, there were already signs of him giving up. This was normal. Qianjun recalled the past, and the kindness of Xia Chang'e's rebirth emerged in his heart. His kindness to Xia Chang'e would influence his decision. Forget it, Qianjun sighed. In the end, he still made a decision that Charlotte did not want to see. But this time, a little sound came from the back of the living room. It was the sound of a car braking. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. He clearly remembered that the location of the house was relatively remote. The road was very narrow, and it was impossible for a car to drive fast. However, the sound of a car braking could only be heard when the car was running at high speed and the brakes had been stepped on. What kind of person would drive a car at high speed on a narrow road in a residential area? For what reason? Charlotte moved his eyes to the back wall of the living room. At that moment, he awakened the X-ray vision of his left eye. A great wall leather car entered his sight. Several armed men with black headscarves and green strips of cloth on their heads got out of the car. They were holding AK-47s in their hands. In the compartment of the leather car was a famous Russian 12.7mm Kurt machine gun. The machine gunner in the car adjusted the direction of the muzzle and aimed at the back wall of the house. After this car drove off, A few more armored cars with brightly colored leather drove over. The armed men in the cars were also equipped with heavy machine guns. The armed groups in the Gaza Strip had come, and it seemed that they were elites. In fact, passing through the Gaza Strip was a very dangerous thing because it was, after all, the territory of Hamas. In the time it took to see the armed men of the armed groups, Charlotte's brain also sorted out the whole incident. How could Hamas not know that Israel was carrying out a large-scale operation? Israel was under lockdown, and the people they were arresting were the ones they had smuggled in from Jerusalem. They ran away, leaving a trail of dead bodies behind. Then they found the 2 abandoned pickup trucks in Gaza City. Therefore, it was easy for the other party to determine that he and his men were still in Acceleration City. In Gaza, every radical is an informer. 2 Native Americans and a Chinese man with waist-length hair. That in itself was an eye-catching presence. It wasn't strange for armed groups to find their way here. However, the other party had arrived a little too quickly. Charlotte had to admit that he had underestimated his opponent's abilities. The armed groups in the Gaza Strip had fought against Israel for so many years. How could they be simple? Qianjun's ears also moved, but he couldn't see the situation outside like Charlotte. At this time, there was no sound outside. However, Charlotte's actions still aroused his vigilance. Is there a situation? Charlotte suddenly stood up and shouted in Mandarin, "Get down." With a loud roar, Charlotte's body suddenly fell to the ground. Qianjun's reaction was slightly slower, but it was still very fast. When Charlotte fell to the ground, he also fell to the ground. As soon as the 2 of them fell to the ground, the machine gunners in front and behind opened fire. Ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. The unique sound of a heavy machine gun firing was like a hammer pounding on people's eardrums. The 12, 7x108mm machine gun bullets rained down on the house, each bullet weighing more than 1 kilogram, and they hit the wall at a speed of 1,500 meters per second. In almost a second, the entire back wall of the house was torn apart and smashed into pieces. Thick smoke billowed, and the people in the house couldn't see the situation outside. Under the crazy fire of heavy machine guns, no one dared to look up. Even if they were not hit in the vital parts, even if they were hit in the limbs, it would be a fatal injury. However, Charlotte was an exception. The thick smoke couldn't block his vision, and when the machine gunner adjusted the direction of the machine gun, he couldn't avoid being locked on by his left eye. In the almost negligible gap of time, when the machine gunner slightly adjusted the curtain-heavy machine gun's direction, Charlotte, who was lying on the ground, had already pulled out his gun and fired. Puff! A bullet from the Viper pistol pierced through the machine gunner's forehead, and his body fell backwards, falling out of the car. With the machine gunner dead, the remaining armed men who were preparing to rush into the house from the back wall suddenly lost their firepower support. Charlotte's fingers moved, and, in a second, he fired 4 shots in succession. 4 armed men also fell to the ground in that second. Each of their foreheads had a bullet hole. Qianjun was a little confused. From Charlotte's warning to him firing back, the whole process only took 3 to 5 seconds. But in that short amount of time, he had actually killed 5 of the enemy's armed personnel, including the machine gunner. If Charlotte rescued him from the Mossad Jerusalem base by relying on careful planning and luck, then the terrifying strength that Charlotte displayed now was enough to put him, the strongest soldier in the Zodiac squad, to shame. In the crisis just now, he didn't even dare to raise his head to attack the machine gunner behind him in the smoke-covered area. But Charlotte ended the battle in 2 seconds. The thing in the amber. Qianjun's thoughts returned to the pyramid in the belly of the mountain. Now is not the time to talk about this kind of thing. The enemy still has people coming. We have to leave this place. Charlotte climbed up from the ground, grabbed his equipment bag, turned around, and ran out. He was very clear what Qianjun wanted to know from him, but now was definitely not the time. Akiko, Tsukino, Yelena, and Angyumi Khan also ran out from a room, along with Sayamu and his woman, Yada. Sayamu's upper body was bare, while his woman's lower body only had a triangular underwear. The clothes on them were obviously put on in a panic. It was not difficult to guess what they were doing just now. Damn it! I will kill them. Sayemu roared angrily. No one paid attention to him, because they had something important to do. Akiko Tsukino, Yelena, and Angyumi Kan opened their equipment bags, took out their weapons and ammunition, and prepared to fight. Akiko Tsukino and Yelena took out their Gale assault rifles, while Angyumi Kan quickly assembled his XL 2500 sniper rifle. Charlotte's Gale assault rifle had fallen in the passage of the pyramid, and he only had a Viper pistol on him. Use mine. Akiko Tsukino threw her Gale assault rifle to Charlotte. Charlotte smiled at her. Akiko Tsukino's forte was never guns, but knives and hidden weapons. She had her own fighting style, and it did not make much difference whether she had a Gale assault rifle or not. After receiving the Gale assault rifle from Akiko Tsukino, Charlotte threw his Viper pistol to Qianjun. It's yours. Just as everyone was arming themselves, Sayemu was also ready for battle, and his weapon was also a Gale assault rifle. His upper body was bare, and he had thick chest hair. The Gale assault rifle and his chest hair formed a valiant image. His woman looked at him excitedly, while Akiko Tsukino curled her lips in disdain. After everyone was ready, Charlotte took the lead and rushed to the front door. In his line of sight, the armed pickup trucks that came as reinforcements had spread out, trying to surround the house. 12 o'clock direction, armed pickup truck, 5 enemies. 10 o'clock direction, armed pickup truck, 5 enemies. While running to the door, Charlotte was like a spy satellite, reporting the location and number of enemies. Boom! Charlotte kicked open the door and fired the Gale assault rifle in his hand without aiming. Bang, 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 bang. 5 consecutive shots. It was not a burst shot, but a standard strafing shot. But after 5 gunshots, the machine gunner from the armed pickup truck in the 12 o'clock direction, as well as the 4 armed men who had just gotten out of the truck, fell to the ground. Every one of them was a headshot. It was that simple, and the enemy's firepower in the 12 o'clock direction was eliminated. Bang, bang, bang. The Zodiac members who rushed out of the door launched a counterattack. Qianjun was the only one who did not shoot the enemy. His eyes were not on any of the enemies, but on Charlotte. He was different from the other Zodiac members. He had never fought with Charlotte before, so he had no idea how strong Charlotte was. But now, in his eyes, Xia Lei was already an undefeatable figure. He was like a god. The armed group had a lot of people. After all, there were several armed pickup trucks. But the Zodiac team was never afraid of fighting with a large number of enemies, because they were the world's strongest warriors. After Charlotte eliminated the firepower in the 12 o'clock direction, they used the same method. They first sniped the most threatening sniper, then eliminated the AK-47 assault rifle. Although the AK-47 and the Gale assault rifle were both members of the rifle world, the latter was the king of the rifle world. They were simply not on the same level. Their strength was much weaker, and their weapons and equipment were much weaker. The battle was actually a one-sided massacre. Amidst the gunshots, the armed men fell to the ground one by one. They were good at street fighting, but they had no idea what kind of enemies they were facing. When the battle was nearing its end, Charlotte suddenly shouted, 11 o'clock direction, sniper in the crack of the wall. The Zodiac members instantly found their respective bunkers. Snipers hiding in the crack of the wall. As strong as they were, they had to avoid them. But at this moment, Qianjun finally moved. His feet stepped on the ground, and his body rushed forward like an arrow released from a bowstring. Bang! A gunshot came from 100 meters away. Before the gunshot, a bullet had brushed past Qianjun's body and hit an electric pole on the side of the road. Sparks splashed, and a piece of the cement pole suddenly broke. Qianjun did not stop. He moved even faster. Another bullet flew towards Qianjun, but he changed the trajectory of his sprint the moment before the bullet flew towards him, avoiding the bullet. Of course, he could not see the bullet from the sniper rifle. It was just his prediction. That guy, Sayemu suddenly said. That's right. Every member of the Zodiac team was strong, and they rarely respected others. It was actually very impressive for Sayemu to say not bad. A distance of 100 meters, in 5 seconds, Qianjun entered the building where the sniper was hiding. The world record of 100 meters was Usain Bolt's 9. 58 seconds, but Qianjun's time was 5 seconds. There was no gunshot, but Charlotte knew that the sniper had been shot in the head by Qianjun at a distance of 1 meter. The strongest soldier of the Zodiac team? That was true. Chapter 1032. After the battle ended, the area was dead silent. When the first wave of gunfire started, the people in the area began to flee. By the time the battle ended, the area was almost empty. Qianjun returned to Charlotte's side with a Russian-made sniper rifle in his hand. It was his trophy. Although it wasn't as good as the XL 2500 sniper rifle, it was enough for street fighting. "You run really fast," Charlotte said. Qianjun said, "Sometimes you have to run faster to survive." It was just a simple sentence, but Xiaolei knew the hard training behind it, as well as the countless battles on the battlefield. "What do we do now?" Engumi Khan asked. Charlotte quickly observed the surroundings and made tactical arrangements. "Take off the clothes from the corpses. We'll change into their appearance and kill our way out." "Good, that's a good idea." Engumi Khan looked very happy. Disguising as the enemy and blending into the crowd to kill them was the favorite tactic of many terrorists. Now, the Zodiac squad also used this tactic, but it had nothing to do with terror. It was just to escape. In just 2 minutes, everyone changed into armed men's clothes. Even the black scars and green headbands were not left behind. The only person who didn't change was Siamu's woman, Yada, but she didn't need it at all. She was wearing the traditional clothes of Arab women. She covered herself from head to toe. Only her eyes were exposed. "Yada, leave here immediately and prepare a boat for us to Egypt," Siam said. "I need an hour. I'll call you then." Yada turned and left. "Can she do it?" Charlotte asked. Siam has said, "Trust me, she'll be fine. My women are all good." Charlotte said, "All right, let's go to the port." "No, it's a fishing village called Green Pearl. I know that place. It's east of Gaza City. We have to kill our way there," Simas said. He pulled up the satellite map on the multifunction watch on his wrist, zoomed in, and soon found the Green Pearl fishing village. Almost at the same time, all the Zodiac squad members synchronized their multifunction wristwatches with Siamu's satellite map and entered walking navigation mode. A multifunction watch worth $200,000 might seem expensive, but it was actually worth it. After confirming their destination, Charlotte took the lead and avoided the main road, passing through the alleys. The armed groups in Gaza quickly mobilized their men. Armed pickup trucks carrying armed men entered the area to search for the target. Almost none of the militants in the Gaza Strip thought their enemies would leave alive, because this was their territory and they dominated everything here. You take your men and block the east exit. You took your men to seal the exit. You take your men. An important leader of the armed group in the Gaza Strip ordered. Once you find a target, kill everyone except the investor. Things had developed to this point, but in the minds of these armed men, money was still the most important thing. After the important leader of the armed group gave the order, the small leaders took their men to outflank the target in 4 directions. This time, the armed groups in the Gaza Strip had dispatched more than 500 armed men. In terms of the scale of the operation, even if the Israeli ground troops enter the Gaza Strip, it would not be on such a scale in a local area. More than 500 armed men were chasing after 6 people. Almost everyone on Charlotte's side had to fight 100 people alone. Judging from the huge disparity in numbers, there was almost no suspense about the outcome of this battle. The winner would be the armed groups in the Gaza Strip. But was that really the case? A team of about 100 armed men quickly entered the eastern area. Under the instructions of a small leader, more than a dozen armed pickup trucks blocked all the exits in the eastern area. Streets, alleys, and even the manhole covers were not missed. Seeing his men move quickly, the small leader in charge of the eastern area was very relaxed. He came out of a resident's house with a chair and a pot of milk tea. He put the chair in the middle of the road, sat down, and drank the milk tea. The communicator in her hand sent out reports from other areas. Even if the Israeli Mossad commandos came here, they would have to go out lying down. That group of people dared to kill our people, but when I get enough money from him, I will personally cut off his head, the small leader said to the assistant next to him. The assistant of the small leader said, "Our people sent back news from Jerusalem." The guy lied to them. There was no lockbox in the hotel room. There was no $1 million or diamonds worth $5 million. The guy used this lie to get them away and then killed our people. The guy can't escape. When I catch him, I will let him eat something. Eat what? Before he could finish his sentence, a bullet that came out of nowhere pierced into his mouth and flew out from the back of his head. His body fell to the ground, and blood gushed out from his mouth and the back of his head like a fountain. The words he didn't finish were actually to say that he wanted his client to suffer a little, but he didn't expect that before he could do anything, he would eat a bullet himself. The milk tea pot in the small leader's hand fell to the ground, and with a bang, it broke into pieces. He looked in front of him in horror, but he didn't see anyone at all. A second later, he jumped up from a chair and pointed in the direction of the suspected bullet trajectory. Fire! The two machine gunners and the two armed pickup trucks behind him opened fire at the same time. Dang, dang, dang. Dang, dang, dang. The heavy machine guns roared, and bullets weighing more than 50 grams were fired in the direction of 12 o'clock. Wherever the bullets passed, the walls were pierced and the stones were destroyed. Kill! Kill those infidels! The small leader roared excitedly. Pooh! Just as his voice fell, he stopped abruptly. A bullet from a Gale assault rifle pierced his forehead, blowing off his entire skull. Skulls flew in the air, accompanied by white brain matter and red blood. This scene was full of gothic beauty. The small leader was shot in the head, and the two machine gunners were confused because they didn't know where the enemy was and where they should shoot. They had heavy machine guns, and the firing speed and range were even better than ordinary sniper rifles, but they couldn't see the enemy. How could they fight this battle? But a second later, they didn't have to worry about this problem. Pu. The two machine gunners were also shot in the head, and then they fell from the armed pickup truck. The two people who replaced them climbed up the truck, but just as they climbed under the machine gun rack, a bullet hit the fuel tank of one of the armed pickup trucks. Boom! Amidst the violent explosion, flames rose into the sky, and the pieces of the pickup truck and the explosive bullets shot in all directions like a storm. The armed personnel who couldn't dodge in time were instantly dismembered and thrown to the ground. Just like that, the main road of the eastern region was opened. 500 meters away, Charlotte put away the Gale assault rifle in his hand. Beside him, Qianjun also put down the Russian-made sniper rifle in his hand. In the battle, just now to open up the main road, Charlotte successively killed two small leaders and a machine gunner. Qianjun also killed the other machine gunner and the fuel tank of the armed pickup truck. Good job, Charlotte said with a smile. Qianjun also smiled. Far worse than you. I've never seen anyone use an assault rifle as a sniper rifle, and it's even at a distance of 500 meters. This Gale assault rifle was designed by me, and it's also produced by my company. If you like it, I can give you one, Charlotte said. Qianjun nodded and didn't say thank you. He wasn't the kind of man who would say thank you. Charlotte also felt that the battle and communication was closing the distance between him and Qianjun. Are we going to go through the east road now? Qianjun asked. Charlotte looked at the other three directions and then said, no, the survivors in the east have already entered the houses on both sides. If we go through the east, we will be attacked by them. If we go to the north, the people in the north are rushing to the east. They think we're fighting in the east, so we'll go to the north. Qianjun had a strange expression. Guerrilla warfare? Charlotte smiled. To be precise, it's guerrilla warfare plus urban warfare. Qianjun's lips moved. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Bang! A gunshot sounded, and on a roof in the east, an armed group's sniper fell from the roof. Only a third of his head was left. The one who fired the shot was Engyumi Khan. He put away the XL 2500 sniper rifle in his hand, and then looked at Charlotte, and proudly gave a thumbs up. Yelena also gave him the middle finger. Engyumi Khan shrugged his shoulders, looking helpless. All the members of the Zodiac squad gathered around Charlotte from their hiding spots, and then sneaked to the north. Charlotte was still at the front. He was the Zodiac Squad's human radar. All the armed personnel hiding in the buildings couldn't hide from him. Even if they were hiding 2 kilometers away, he could see them at a glance. And once he found and locked onto a target, they would usually report to their god in the next second. He was the sniper king of this world. Now, he was the king of urban warfare. On the deserted streets, the people who didn't have time to retreat peeked through the windows and cracks of the doors at the team moving north. But no one suspected that they were invaders because the armed group that ruled this land looked just like them. All the way to the north, they killed all the enemies they encountered. Although the number of people in the Zodiac Squad was only a few hundred times that of the armed group, there were definitely no more than 10 people who saw them along the way. This was the advantage of weapons and equipment. Rema Group's infantry weapons were the best in the world, whether it was the Storm Assault Rifle or the XL 2500 Sniper Rifle. They were the king of long-range attacks. Kill. Corpses were everywhere. Chapter 1033. A search team of more than a dozen armed men appeared on a deserted street. They had AK-47s and rocket launchers in their hands. They had powerful firepower. They marched along the shops on both sides of the street, searching for the target they wanted to shoot. The owner of a bakery was pulled out. The leader of the team pointed a gun at the head of the bakery owner and said fiercely, "Tell me, did you see anyone suspicious?" The owner of the bakery trembled in fear, and his voice was stuttering. Just a team passed by here." "What team?" Like you. Other than your people, I didn't see anyone suspicious," the owner of the bakery said. Said the baker. Then he implored, "I swear to Allah that I am telling the truth. Everyone is hiding. I don't know anything. Do you want some bread? Take it. I don't want your money." The owner of the bakery was so scared that he could not speak coherently. "If you see anyone suspicious, especially the Indians, report to us immediately." Yes, I will. I swear I will." The owner of the bakery nodded repeatedly. The leader pushed the owner of the bakery to the ground and led the team in the opposite direction. In the eyes of the leader, since there were his own people in front of him, there was no need for him to go to the same place. He was on a search a new area. He hoped to find a target there and then kill everyone except for the investor. "Boss, isn't that one of us?" As they moved forward, an armed man suddenly pointed to an alley on the side. The leader looked over and immediately saw a tall and well-endowed armed man. He was stunned for a moment. Since when did the organization in the Gaza Strip have female fighters? "Catch her." The leader came back to his senses in the blink of an eye. He raised the AK-47 in his hand and shot at the female armed man. Bang, bang, bang. The aim of the AK-47 was really bad. The bullets didn't even hit the woman within a 1-meter radius. The armed woman ducked behind the corner of the alley and disappeared from sight. More than a dozen armed men swarmed up. Some fired, some shouted, and the momentum was terrifying. But just as they all rushed into the alley, 6 people suddenly appeared behind them. Puff, puff, puff. The Storm Assault Rifle fired, and more than a dozen armed men collapsed in the alley. The blood that flowed from their bodies dyed half the alley red. The person who had just disappeared walked out from the corner. She was Yelena from the Zodiac Squad. Yelena walked towards Charlotte and the others. Her steps were light, and as she walked, she tightened the cloth around her chest. Only when she was acting as bait would she untie the cloth that bound her chest, revealing her weakness as a woman to the enemy. This is the last search team in the northern region, but if we go out from here, we will reach the center of Gaza City. There are too many people in that place. It will be difficult for us to fight like this. Siamu said to Charlotte. Charlotte said, "Then let's fight our way back to the east. We'll break out of the encirclement from the east and then go to the port." He led the members of the Zodiac Squad to clear out all the people in the northern region. The armed forces in the Gaza Strip would definitely think that he would lead his men to the center of Gaza City from the north. It was hard to imagine that he would lead his men back to the east. Facing such an enemy, the commander of the armed forces in the Gaza Strip would be confused even if he had 10 heads, because the enemy he was facing was cheating. The terrible thing about urban warfare was that people could hide in any corner of the city, and it was impossible to guard against them. But now, no matter where they hid, they would be found, and they would be found from a kilometer or two away. How could they fight in urban warfare under such circumstances? There were hundreds of armed men in the northern region, but when Charlotte and his men retreated from the northern region, more than 100 armed men had become corpses. Most of them were killed by long-range snipers. They didn't even see the faces of the enemies. Some of them were ambushed and killed by random gunfire. There were no enemies in the northern region, so the process of retreat was very easy. Charlotte, the human radar, provided the members of the Zodiac squad with a 100% safe marching route. Within a radius of 2 kilometers, not to mention armed men with guns, even dogs with chains around their necks could not hide. Qianjun, who was walking on the left side of Charlotte, finally couldn't help but be curious and excited. He asked Charlotte another question. "Charlotte, can you tell me the drugs?" Charlotte nodded. "I know what you want to know. It's true. Now you—" Charlotte interrupted Qianjun. "This is not the time to talk. Have you forgotten? Our previous conversation was not a pleasant one. You have something to hide from me, and now you expect me to tell you everything?" Qianjun suddenly moved closer to Charlotte. "If we can get out of here alive, I will tell you everything." Charlotte was stunned for a moment, then he smiled. His father, Xia Changhe, had conquered him with kindness, and he had conquered him with strength. However, he had to admit that if he wasn't Xia Changhe's son, even if he was Superman, it would have been difficult for him to conquer a man like Qianjun. The team quickly entered the eastern region. The armed men who had survived the previous battle had lost their patience. They came out of their hiding places and prepared to attack Charlotte and the members of the Zodiac squad from the north. They drove the undamaged, armed pickup truck, driving fast on the wide street. The machine gunners in the pickup truck were on high alert. If there was even the slightest movement, they could pull the trigger and use the heavy machine guns in their hands to crush all threats. 5 minutes later, the team crossed the street and turned from the crossroads to the northern region. At this moment, a hail of bullets suddenly flew from the houses around the intersection. Bullets flew from all directions, and the armed men in the pickup truck had nowhere to run, let alone a chance to fire back. To make matters worse, their armored pickup truck was obviously not bulletproof. Not to mention the bullets from the XL 2500 sniper rifle and the Gale assault rifle. Even the bullets from a Viper pistol would be able to penetrate it and kill the people in the truck. This was not a battle, but a massacre. After the team entered the ambush circle set up by Charlotte and the members of the Zodiac squad, all of them were killed in just 5 seconds. The armed pickup truck that had lost control rushed into the buildings on the side of the road, smashing through the walls, and was buried by the collapsed walls. Some crashed into trees, and the bodies in the front row were thrown to the ground more than 10 meters away. Some were flipped over by a roadblock, and the wheels were still spinning. Charlotte walked out of the building, opened the door of an armed pickup truck that had crashed into a tree, and took a communicator from the driver. A man's roar came from the communicator. "Where are they? Who are they? No matter the price, we must kill them." Charlotte turned off the communicator's voice. "Siamu, do you know who this person is?" "This voice." Siamu thought for a moment. "It should be the second leader of the armed group in the Gaza Strip, Guliesa. Do you want to kill him? If you want, I can do it." Charlotte shook his head. "The conflict between us is only because they didn't manage to kidnap us. We have killed so many of them. We have vented our anger, and they have learned their lesson. I hope that the conflict between us will end here and that it won't get worse." "What if they find out it's us?" Siamu asked. Charlotte said, "The possibility of that is very small, but if it does happen, I want to solve the problem in my own way. Get your informants to collect information about them and observe their movements. If they find out it's us and want to escalate the conflict, then negotiate with them. I am willing to use money and weapons to solve the problem. If that doesn't solve the problem, then we will kill them." "I know what to do," Siamu said. "All right, it's time for us to leave this place. Let's go now." Xiaolei suddenly lifted his head and looked in the direction of Jerusalem. 2 kilometers away, a Heron 2 drone was flying quickly in their direction. It was 3,000 meters high and carried 4 air-to-ground missiles under its belly. Charlotte could see the drone with missiles, but the other members of the Zodiac squad couldn't. They also looked in the same direction, but it was just the sky. "Get down!" Charlotte suddenly roared. Although the other members of the Zodiac squad didn't know what was happening, they all lay on the ground out of their absolute trust and admiration for Charlotte. "Everyone don't move," Charlotte warned again. Except for Qianjun, the other members of the Zodiac squad lied on the ground and pretended to be dead. Qianjun hesitated for a moment and also lay on the ground. As soon as he laid down, the drone carrying the air-to-ground missiles swooped down from an altitude of 3,000 meters. In the blink of an eye, it descended to an altitude of about 900 meters. 2 seconds later, even he could see the 4 air-to-ground missiles carried by the drone. For Israel, airstrikes in Gaza were as easy as eating and drinking. The armed groups in the Gaza Strip simply didn't have the ability to shoot down their planes. But this time, their target was obviously not an important figure in the armed groups in the Gaza Strip, but Charlotte, Qianjun, and the other members of the Zodiac squad. Although Mossad wasn't sure that Charlotte was the one who rescued Qianjun, as long as there was a 1% possibility, they wouldn't let it go. After all, the United States was their strategic ally. Protecting the interests of the United States was equivalent to protecting their own interests. Because of this motive and purpose, the fierce fighting in the Gaza Strip must have been carried out by the Israeli side to investigate. The drone flew across the sky, then turned around and circled around the place that was full of corpses before flying north. The crisis was resolved, and Charlotte got up from the ground. "Huh," Simon said with a smile. "Boss, fighting with you is really a pleasure. It's better than playing with women." Charlotte smiled bitterly. After he and Akiko had a little relationship, Siamu had revealed his true colors. Beep, 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 Siamu's cell phone suddenly rang. He took it out and said with an exaggerated expression, "Women are really troublesome. I can't even leave for a while." Charlotte said, "Don't be so proud. Hurry up and answer the phone. Your woman may have solved the problem of the ship." Only then did Siamu answer the phone. "Hello. Well, I got it. Be careful. We'll be there soon." Akiko Tsukino walked to Charlotte's side. She reached out and wiped a drop of blood off Charlotte's neck. Her movements were very gentle. It was like she was a different person from when she had just killed people. Charlotte smiled slightly. It was the hardest to accept a beauty's kindness. Chapter 1034. The fishing village was very small. There were palm trees and wooden racks for drying fishing nets on the beach. Women were mending fishing nets, and children were playing on the beach. The place was quiet and beautiful, giving off a feeling of being aloof from worldly affairs. A group of armed men arrived at the fishing village. Their appearance immediately broke the peace of the fishing village. The women who were mending fishing nets on the beach took their children and hid in their houses. This group of armed men were the members of the Zodiac team, led by Charlotte. They had killed their way out of Gaza City, entered the suburbs, and then arrived at this remote fishing village. Charlotte's gaze quickly swept across the simple houses. He saw women kneeling on blankets, praying, and children who were too scared to make a sound. There were no landlines here, and he didn't see anyone using a mobile phone to inform anyone. Charlotte shifted his gaze to the sea. He saw a small cargo ship parked outside the fishing village's port. The cargo ship had the flag of Egypt and the logo of the company it belonged to. He activated his telescopic ability to investigate the cargo ship. There was no suspicious person on the ship. Just as he was observing the cargo ship, a speedboat came from the direction of the cargo ship. The person driving the speedboat was Siamu's woman, Yada. The corner of Charlotte's mouth curled up into a smile. Siamu was right. His women were all capable people. He led the members of the Zodiac team to the fishing village's port. It was a natural port, but not a deep-sea port. Small boats like fishing boats and speedboats could enter and leave, but cargo ships obviously couldn't enter. Yada drove the speedboat to the fishing village's port first. She waved at Siamu. Siamu opened his arms and ran towards her, playing the role of a romantic saint to the fullest. Xiaolei turned around and looked into the distance. There were no drones in the sky. He wasn't very worried about the armed groups in the Gaza Strip, because the armed groups in the Gaza Strip didn't have the ability to fight on the sea. He was worried about Israel. If they were discovered by Israeli drones at this time, the cargo ship traveling on the sea would become the target of the drones' missile attack. After confirming that there were no drones in the sky, Charlotte breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to board the speedboat, a door in the fishing village opened. A child poked his head out from behind the door, holding a mobile phone in his hand. Charlotte's heart immediately tensed up. His gaze locked onto the child's lips. Puff! A bullet pierced the child's head, causing it to explode. The phone in his hand fell to the ground, and his body fell behind the door. Charlotte's gaze fell on the phone that had fallen to the ground. At that moment, his heart felt as if it had been pierced by a needle. It was very uncomfortable. It wasn't a real phone. It was just a child's toy. Charlotte withdrew his gaze and looked at Qianjun, who was standing beside him. The person who shot the child was Qianjun. He used the scope of his sniper rifle to observe that the child was holding a mobile phone in his hand. His first thought was that the child was an informant of the armed groups in Gaza, or an informant of Mossad, and was about to use a mobile phone to inform them, so he shot the child. Qianjun put down the sniper rifle, then turned and boarded the speedboat. He didn't explain anything. Charlotte's lips moved, but he didn't say anything. This kind of thing shouldn't have happened in any case, but he couldn't blame Qianjun. No one could see clearly whether a mobile phone 100 meters away was real or fake like him. If the child was really an informant of the armed groups or Mossad, then the members of his Zodiac team would be in extreme danger. Therefore, looking at it from his point of view, Qianjun didn't do anything wrong. On the contrary, he did what a soldier should do. This was war, the cruelest behavior of human beings. The biggest example was the Arab Spring movement launched by the United States in the Middle East. The United States claimed to bring freedom and peace to the Arabs in the Middle East, but in reality, it was war. The American fighter jets flew over the skies of the Arab world without fear, but a large number of the targets killed were the elderly, women, and children. Charlotte also boarded the speedboat. This wasn't the time for him to feel sorry for the victims of war. To survive on the battlefield, sometimes one had to be cruel. Yada drove the speedboat back to the cargo ship. After the speedboat was hoisted onto the cargo ship, she threw a life buoy into the sea. Siamu and Yada hugged and kissed, saying some mushy words. The other members of the Zodiac team didn't want to see this mushy scene, so they left to check the cargo ship. Charlotte didn't leave. When Siamu and Yada separated, he walked to Yada's side and took out all the cash from his equipment bag. It was a huge pile of money, about $300,000. "Boss, what are you doing?" Siamu said. "You don't have to give her money." Charlotte said, "It's not for her." He said to Yada, "Yada, that kid, he's not an informant. Give this money to his family as a form of compensation." Yada's lips curled into a smile. "I will, sir. You are a very good person." "Be careful," Charlotte reminded him. Yada nodded, turned around, and dove into the sea. The cargo ship started moving and headed in the direction of Egypt. The members of the Zodiac team quickly finished searching the entire cargo ship. The crew of the cargo ship were mostly from third-world countries in Asia, and the owner was an Iraqi. Yada had made use of a relationship between Siamu and the owner to solve the problem of retreat. Siamu chatted with the owner in the captain's room. The other members of the Zodiac team hid their guns and ammunition, changed into sailor suits, and became the sailors of the cargo ship. When he was done, Charlotte went to the aft deck. Qianjun was also on the aft deck, looking in the direction of Israel. He had been tortured in that place, and now he had left it and regained his freedom. Only he could understand what he was feeling at that moment. Xiaolei walked to his side and stood side by side with him. He also looked in the direction of Israel, but he was thinking about the pyramid and the strange things that had happened in the pyramid. The two men just stood there, looking and reminiscing, neither of them saying a word. Suddenly, Charlotte broke the silence. "That kid, he was holding a toy in his hand, not a real phone." Qianjun said, "I know. When I killed him, your expression changed. At that moment, I knew I killed the wrong person. Charlotte smiled bitterly. I don't want to say anything to you, but next time, it's best to wait until the situation is confirmed before shooting. Qianju nodded. Okay, let's get down to business. Charlotte said, you promised that if we could leave Gaza alive, you would tell me everything you know. Qianjun withdrew his gaze from the distance and sat on the deck. Charlotte was slightly stunned. Then he also sat on the deck. Your father. It was still difficult for him to speak. Qianjun took a deep breath and organized his thoughts before continuing. Last time, I told you the story between your father and me. This time, I'll start from there. Charlotte listened quietly, his heart full of anticipation. My father gave me a task. He asked me to go to Jerusalem to familiarize myself with the environment and learn Hebrew. It was a very strange task, but as long as it was something that my father asked me to do, I would do it. So I came to Jerusalem. My footsteps were all over every street and every historical site in Jerusalem. A year later, I had learned enough Hebrew and could communicate with Jews normally. Then, my father gave me a new mission. My father gave me a human skin mask and turned me into a student. The student was an archaeology student at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I killed the student. I took his place. I entered the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, but it was not a real school. My father's real purpose was to let me get in touch with Professor Mark. Professor Mark, Charlotte remembered this person. In a video shot by the American archaeologist George, Mark's life ending was that he was shot in the head by Qianjun. Charlotte interrupted Qianjun. My father asked you to pretend to be Professor Mark's student, but you didn't even go to school. How could you hide from a professor? Qianjun said, I wore a spy device on me. Through that device, I could receive the knowledge I wanted. In class, if Professor Mark asked me questions, I knew nothing about those questions, but my father arranged people to give me the correct answers through the spy device. So, my performance was very good, and I soon won Professor Mark's favor. 2 months later, I joined an archaeology project of Professor Mark. He needed a helper, and I, who had excellent grades and unique opinions, was the person he needed. I became Professor Mark's assistant and got the opportunity to enter his studio. Charlotte asked anxiously, is Professor Mark's archaeology project the pyramid? Qianjun was silent for a moment, then said, it's not called a pyramid. It just looks like a pyramid. Charlotte was stunned for a moment. Then what is it called? Perhaps no one knows what its real name is. Professor Mark called it the tomb of Prometheus. Prometheus, the god of wisdom in Greek mythology, created human beings and taught them how to use fire and cultivate. Professor Mark compared the pyramid in the belly of the mountain to the tomb of Prometheus. What was his basis? Charlotte couldn't help but think about this question. Qianjun continued, but that was when the research was about to end. When I entered Professor Mark's studio, he was still looking for clues in a lot of historical books. What clues was he looking for? Of course, clues about the tomb. Qianjun said the project he was researching lasted for 30 years, which means that he started when he was young. At that time, he was not a professor yet. He collected information and researched alone. Almost all the money he earned was spent on that project. Later, he became a professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and his situation improved. I actually entered the project at the last stage. I read the ancient books that he collected for most of his life and the clues he found. One of the most important clues was the crystal skull. Charlotte's heart was pounding and trembling. Chapter 1035. Blue sky, white clouds, cargo shipped to Egypt. Qianjun continued, I didn't know what the crystal skull was, but I knew it must be what my dad wanted. I began to pay attention to Professor Mark's research. I secretly took pictures of some important information and sent them to my dad. My dad told me not to worry. He told me to be patient and to continue to stay with Professor Mark. Although I was Professor Mark's assistant, I didn't get much trust from him. I couldn't get in touch with the core things. Later, my dad arranged a scene. He bribed some bad guys to attack Professor Mark's granddaughter. I appeared at the most appropriate time and saved Professor Mark's granddaughter when she was about to be insulted. Of course, I also killed the few bad people who had been bribed. I had to make them shut their mouths forever. After that incident, I got Professor Mark's absolute trust. One night, after Professor Mark finished his work, I poured him a glass of wine, and he chatted with me. He asked me some very strange questions. He asked me where I had been a minute ago. I said that I was still here, but he said that this was the me of this minute, not the me of a minute ago. I laughed. At that time, I thought there was something wrong with his brain. He also told me that our human concept of time was too shallow. 1 minute and 60 seconds, 1 hour and 60 minutes, 24 hours a day, 30 days a month, 365 days a year. In a sense, human time was just a record and reminder. Birthdays, wedding anniversaries, important holidays, working hours, quitting work hours, and so on. Apart from these, there was nothing else. But the real time, it is. Qian Jun paused. His eyes were a little empty, as if he was recalling the past more than 10 years ago. Charlotte asked anxiously, "What is it?" "Let me think." Qian Jun closed his eyes and opened them after a minute. He said that the real time is a door, a passage. Door? Passage? What did he mean? Tell me more in detail. I asked him the same question. He told me that everything in this world would not really disappear. A stone, after millions of years of weathering, it would turn into sand. The wind blew the sand away, and it sank to the bottom of the river. It would accumulate in the riverbed, and after millions of years, the sand would turn into rocks again. Time was the same. The past minute, the past hour, the past year, the past 100 years, no matter which second it was, would not disappear. They're all around us. As long as we find the door and the passage, we can enter the world of the past and see who we were a minute ago or a year ago. He said he wanted to know what the world was like in the past, whether people were moving or not. Charlotte suddenly thought of the ancient alloy box. He had done related experiments. He had thrown things into the world of the box, and all of the things that came out were weathered, as if they had been weathered for thousands of years. He exclaimed in his mind, could it be that the ancient alloy box is the door and passage that Professor Mark mentioned? He talked a lot about time, but I'm not interested in that. Finally, he talked about his research. He said that his research was actually a topic that the Mayans had been researching during the Classic period. He found some clues in the documents left behind by the Mayans during the Classic period. The crystal skull that the Mayans made was just a replica. The real crystal skull was not a work of art, but a human skull. It was in this world, hidden in a triangular tomb. The Mayans during the Classic period thought that finding the crystal skull would solve the problem of their origin and the mystery of time. He said that the Mayans during the Classic period had a grasp of time in the Stone Age that was equivalent to today's level. Incredible. A paragraph of content that he had read suddenly appeared in Charlotte's mind. The Mayans were the first people to invent 801,000 years earlier than China and Europe. The Mayans estimated that the Earth year was 365, 2,420 days, and the current accurate calculation was 365, 2,422 days. The error was not more than 0.0002 days, and 5,000 years was only a difference of 1 day. The Mayans used a 20 decimal system, and the largest number was 4 billion. The calculation of numbers could be used until 4 million years later. The Mayans used a method similar to an abacus, using 2 marks, dots, and lines. These 2 marks were the basis of today's computers. The calendar that the Mayans used was called the Dzogchen calendar. This calendar was calculated with 260 days in a year, but scientists now pointed out that there was no planet in the solar system that could use this calendar. There were many secrets about the Mayans, but Charlotte was not very interested in those secrets. The reason why this information about the Mayans had surfaced in his brain, and he was thinking about it, was because the Mayans had replicated the crystal skull, the ancient alloy, the prehistoric one, and his armor, Zhu Xianyue, the black-robed man. These people and things appeared in his mind again, like a net that trapped him in the middle of it. Now, there was a new element, the crystal skull. His thoughts were completely messed up. Professor Mark said that the Mayans had been looking for the real crystal skull. The Mayans did not succeed because they could not reach today's Jerusalem, and he was able to succeed because he had already determined a location. He said that as long as he found the crystal skull, he could unlock the secrets of time and the origin of mankind. Speaking of this, Qianjun was silent. Charlotte said, "Did he say who the owner of the crystal skull was?" Qianjun shook his head. "No, he couldn't possibly know everything. Otherwise, he would not have researched for decades before he found the pyramid in the middle of the mountain." Not long after the conversation that night, he hired some people to go to that area. All the detection instruments were useless. There was a very mysterious magnetic field that would point people looking for the crystal skull to the wrong place. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. Could that magnetic field be related to the crystal skull? But if it can release the kind of energy that can interfere with modern instruments, how can the cargo ship that I am on now sail normally? If it is not the crystal skull, how did the mysterious magnetic field form? Professor Mark spent several months in that area before he found the right place. He hired people to cut open the stone wall and found the entrance to the passage. That day, I followed him in, and I was also shocked by the magical scene there. Professor Mark found the skeleton at the top of the pyramid and the crystal skull. He sent 2 people to go up, but they were shot to death before they could touch the crystal skull. He gave the families of the 2 dead people a sum of money to keep their mouths shut and personally disposed of the bodies. That was how the matter was covered up. Charlotte cut in. "Mark is just an ordinary university professor. Where did he get so much money? Not only did he hire people, but he could also use money to solve the problem." I was also very curious about this question, but I didn't ask Mark. I just installed a bug in his phone. This question was quickly answered. The person who funded Professor Mark was an American. Professor Mark has been hiding it from everyone, including me. Charlotte already had a premonition that Qianjun would soon talk about the AE capsule, and this was what he wanted to know the most. After the people died, Professor Mark did not dare to try again, and no one was willing to go up. He turned his attention to the sarcophagus in the pyramid. He even joked with me that the one lying inside was Prometheus, the god who created mankind. If he didn't say it, I still wouldn't understand why he called this place Prometheus's tomb. After he said that, I knew that he really entrusted the mystery of the origin of mankind to the crystal skull and the sarcophagus. All the instruments were useless, and we couldn't detect what was inside the sarcophagus. Professor Mark contacted the Americans, and the Americans sent 2 of their top archaeologists over. At the same time, Professor Mark asked people to start cutting the gaps in the sarcophagus. He was prepared to open the sarcophagus when the Americans came here to repay the Americans for their support. I knew roughly when the sarcophagus would be cut open, but on the day the sarcophagus was about to be cut open, Professor Mark asked me to go to school. He also comforted me by saying that he would tell me everything he discovered. He would also share with me the secrets he unraveled. I knew that this was the request of the Americans, and he was following their instructions. I told my dad about it, and he sent a few people to me. The 2 American experts came to the mountain, and then they entered the interior of the mountain. I calculated the time and put on the human skin mask that my dad gave me. I entered the interior of the mountain and killed everyone. I found a piece of amber in the sarcophagus. At that time, I didn't know what was inside, but I knew it was what my dad wanted. I asked the best person to climb up the pyramid to get the crystal skull. He avoided all the skulls and finally touched the crystal skull. But after just a touch, he fell off the pyramid. He fell from a height of a few hundred meters and became a meat patty. I realized that things weren't that simple, so I left the pyramid and walked to a place where I could make a phone call. I contacted my dad, and I told him about the situation. He told me not to care about the crystal skull. I asked him why, and he said that someone would come to get it later. He also set a time and place to meet me, and asked me to give him the amber. I blew up the tunnel and killed everyone who knew. I left Israel and went to Rome, Italy. I came to the place where my dad and I had agreed to meet, but I didn't know that the Americans had already set up a trap and were waiting for me to jump in. I went through a tough battle. Although I succeeded in giving my dad a signal to escape, I was caught. The Americans took the amber, and I was imprisoned in Guantanamo. They tortured me and wanted me to tell them where I found the amber, but I didn't say anything. Later, the Israelis and the Americans reached an agreement, and I was transferred to the dungeon of the most sad. This was Qianjun's story. What happened next didn't need to be described. Dad Xia Chang'e's prophecy also came true. Someone entered the pyramid and took the crystal skull. That person was his son, Charlotte. However, Dad Xia Chang'e didn't predict that Charlotte would rescue Qianjun from the Mossad base. Charlotte suddenly understood why Dad Xia Chang'e didn't tell him the identity and whereabouts of the snake. It was because Dad didn't want him to take the risk to save the snake. Dad had already given up on the snake. People who wanted to do great things had to be cruel and merciless, not only to their enemies, but also to their own people. His father, Xia Chang'e, had performed this to the extreme. After a long silence, Charlotte said, "You floated so much. Was it worth it?" Qianjun smiled. "If it weren't for your father, I would have starved to death under the bridge. You asked me if it was worth it, and my answer is yes. However, compared to Dad's style, I prefer your style." Another way to put it was, "I prefer working under you than working under my father." Charlotte also grinned. "You and Professor Mark found the crystal skull, but you didn't look at it carefully." "I have brought it out of the pyramid. Do you want to see it?" Qianjun nodded. Chapter 1036. Charlotte took Qianjun to a cabin. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Akiko Tsukino sitting by the bed and the equipment bag on the bed. She had been guarding Charlotte's equipment bag. She knew very well how important the things in the bag were to Charlotte. Seeing Charlotte come in with Qianjun, Akiko Tsukino got up and said, "I'll go outside and watch." Charlotte nodded. Akiko Tsukino left the cabin and closed the door when she went out. She was actually very curious about the secret of the crystal skull, but she wouldn't take the initiative to find the answer. Her attitude was that it was best if Charlotte was willing to tell her. It didn't matter if Charlotte didn't want to tell her. Charlotte opened the equipment bag and took out the crystal skull. The cabin was on the bottom floor. The light in the cabin came from an ordinary incandescent lamp. It was about 25 watts, and the light was dim. But as soon as the crystal skull appeared, the dimly lit cabin suddenly became bright. The crystal skull seemed to absorb the light from the white paper bulb and refract it into the cabin. The light refracted by it was like an enhanced version of moonlight. It was pure and spotless, and also had a crystal-like attribute. It was the first time Charlotte saw such a phenomenon. For a moment, he was also stunned. "It's really beautiful." Qianjun looked very excited. Charlotte said, "Do you think it's a real skull?" Qianjun looked carefully and said, "I don't know. Professor Mark has studied it for decades and consulted countless materials. He said that this crystal skull is a real skull. I believe his judgment. After all, he is a professional. Back then, my father's goal was the amber in the sarcophagus, not the crystal skull, right?" Charlotte asked. "I don't know about that. Maybe. I told the coordinates of the mountain to my father. He should know that place. After my accident, he had the chance to take the crystal skull, but he didn't do that. From this point of view, his goal was indeed not the crystal skull." Qianjun said, "Do you know that there's a secret passage in that mountain? Seal it with a special wax. If you enter through that secret passage, you will reach the middle and upper part of the pyramid." "I know. The secret passage was discovered by the people I sent to retrieve the crystal skull. It was indeed sealed with wax, so it was impossible to discover it from the outside. The man fell to his death a few minutes after he told me about the discovery. I told my father about this secret, and I even drew a picture for him." Qianjun said. Charlotte understood. No wonder his father would leave him a message at the foot of the mountain, telling him the specific location of the secret passage. If it wasn't for Qianjun's drawing, he wouldn't have been able to find that secret passage. However, even though he had figured out this matter, Charlotte's suspicions towards his father, Xia Chang'e, continued to grow. He himself was a person full of secrets, but he increasingly felt that his father's secrets were no less than his. Charlotte secretly said in his heart, "The next time we meet, I must ask him properly. If he still hides from me, I won't let him have any grandchildren." "Charlotte, can I?" Qianjun hesitated for a moment. "Can I touch it?" Charlotte said, Of course you can. Qianjun reached out and picked up the crystal skull. At that moment, the crystal skull shone brightly. Charlotte looked at the crystal skull in amazement, but at that moment, Qianjun fell straight to the ground. Be careful! Charlotte hurriedly reached out and grabbed Qianjun's waist, supporting his body. The crystal skull fell from Qianjun's hand and fell on the bed. The bed was covered with blankets and quilts, so the crystal skull wasn't damaged. The crystal skull was fine, but Qianjun really fainted. Charlotte shook him twice, but he didn't even have the slightest reaction. Boss, what happened? Akiko Tsukino's voice came from outside the door. Charlotte said, just an accident. Don't come in. Okay, if you need me, just call me, Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte didn't let Akiko Tsukino in because he was worried what happened to Peaceful would happen to her. The reason he was worried was because he didn't understand the crystal skull at all. If the crystal skull had the power of an ancient alloy, people who touched it would either die or go crazy. Now, he was worried about Qianjun's condition. Hey, wake up, wake up. Charlotte continued to shake Qianjun's body, but Qianjun still didn't react. He put Qianjun on the bed and checked his condition. The results made him sigh in relief. Qianjun's breathing was normal, and his heartbeat was normal. His brain activity was very slow, which matched the characteristics of a sleeping brain. All the physiological signs showed that he wasn't hurt. He just fainted for no reason. Charlotte moved his eyes to the crystal skull. The crystal skull lay quietly on the bed, sparkling and translucent, dazzling and dazzling. It was hard to imagine a person's skull looking like that. If a person's skull looked like that, what would their eyes look like? White, blue, or black? What would his skin look like? Was it also crystal clear like this? In the blink of an eye, Charlotte's brain had a lot of questions. Then he picked up the crystal skull and held it in his hand. He didn't faint, but he felt the crystal skull in his hand was very cold. Why did Qianjun faint when he touched it? But I'm fine. Charlotte's heart was confused. He suddenly thought of Qianjun's description. Qianjun said he sent a good man to the top of the pyramid to get the crystal skull. But when the good man touched the crystal skull, he fell. Did he faint too? Although this was just a guess, the good man must have encountered the same thing that Qianjun encountered at the moment. He fainted when he touched the crystal skull. The difference was that Qianjun would be fine even if he fell to the ground, but the good man fell from a height of a few hundred meters. There was no possibility of him surviving. Why did others faint when they touched it, but I'm fine? Also, Father didn't let Qianjun take the crystal skull. He knew the location, but he didn't go to get it. Did he already know what the characteristics of the crystal skull were? Charlotte couldn't help but guess in depth. A few minutes passed, and Qianjun still didn't show any signs of waking up. Xiaolei's mind was also messed up by a lot of questions. He shook his head and chased all the questions out of his mind. He moved his eyes to the crystal skull and then awakened his X-ray vision. Last time, his X-ray vision started from the right eye socket of the crystal skull. This time, he changed his position and entered from a point in the middle of the crystal skull. His X-ray vision penetrated the crystal skull and entered the inside of it. At that moment, Charlotte's brain suddenly shook violently. He felt like his whole brain was about to fall apart. It was extremely uncomfortable. This feeling disappeared in the blink of an eye. What followed was the feeling of staying in a dark dungeon for a month and suddenly being thrown into an environment that was scorching hot. All he could see was a vast expanse of white light, and he couldn't see anything. This process was more painful than the concussion just now. It was as if a knife was cutting his brain and eyeballs. It was accompanied by a stinging pain on his nerves. His head also felt like it was about to explode. Just when he was in extreme pain, many shining substances appeared. They were like the clean stars in the night sky, and also like the powder of gems. They fluttered in his brain like a beautiful snowfall. Then, in the white light and shining powder, a person appeared. His back was slender and well-proportioned, but his face couldn't be seen. He looked very lonely. He walked step by step. A door appeared in front of him. Looking closely, it might not be a door. It was just a vortex made of light and powder. He disappeared in the vortex. Charlotte wanted to see more, but when the figure disappeared in the halo, his X-ray vision seemed to hit a wall and was abruptly bounced back. The X-ray vision ended, but Charlotte was still holding the crystal skull in a daze. He looked like he was thinking about a very troublesome problem, but his mind was blank. Qianjun made a sound in his throat. Only then did Charlotte come back to his senses. He hurriedly put the crystal skull into his equipment bag and then went to Qianjun's side. "Hello, how are you?" Qianjun opened his eyes. Why am I in your bed?" Charlotte was stunned. "What's going on?" Qianjun got up from the bed. His movements were agile, and there was no sign of discomfort. He looked a little confused. "Aren't we on the deck? What's going on?" "You?" Charlotte was stunned. Qianjun shrugged and said self-deprecatingly, "I'm sorry. Maybe I've been in the dungeon for too long, and there's something wrong with my brain." "No." Charlotte wanted to explain the situation to him, but he did not know how to describe it. "Forget it. That's my problem. It's just a small problem. I'll solve it. I've told you everything I know, so let's leave it at that. I'm going to take a shower and then have a good sleep." Qianjun turned and left. Charlotte watched him leave. He looked calm on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. The crystal skull can not only release a magnetic field that interferes with modern instruments, but it can also make people lose their memories. Qianjun's situation is obviously amnesia. He suddenly lost his memory for about an hour. He doesn't even remember anything that happened in the cabin. He's so clean that it's like he's wiped it with an eraser. But why am I fine? Akiko Tsukino walked in with a smile on her face. "Boss, we'll be in Egypt soon. What's your plan?" Her petite figure contained surging energy, and her smile also carried a secret hint. Her mind was not on the plan, but on the person who had made it. Charlotte cursed in his heart. He braced himself and said, "Well, I think." Before he could finish, Siamu's voice suddenly came from the corridor of the cabin. F***CK. "What the hell? Boss, come take a look. Something's happened." Xiaolei broke into a run and ran outside. Akiko Tsukino lowered her head weakly. Then she waved her hand. A cold light flashed, and a broom that was placed under the cabin wall was instantly broken. "Siamu, this is your penis," she said. Chapter 1037. As soon as he got out of the cabin, Charlotte saw Siamu standing in the corridor. His expression was strange, but he didn't look nervous. Charlotte was a little puzzled. "What happened?" "Boss, come take a look," Siamu said. Charlotte followed Siamu to the deck. He saw the Iraqi captain and a few sailors standing at the bow of the ship, discussing something. The captain looked ahead with his binoculars, and a sailor was comparing something on a map spread out on the deck. This scene was like a voyage in ancient times, where the captain and sailors who were lost in the sea were looking for an island to land on to resupply. Charlotte suddenly thought of the crystal skull, and he thought to himself, could it be that the crystal skull caused the ship's instruments to fail, so the captain and sailors used the primitive method to confirm the route? Sure enough, just as he was guessing, the captain pointed to the sea in front of the ship and said, "What the hell? We're obviously going to port set in Egypt, but we're actually going to Cyprus." Cyprus, an island country in the Mediterranean Sea. It was 90 degrees away from Port Said, where the cargo ship was going. Charlotte already knew the reason, but he couldn't let the captain and sailors of the ship know. He thought for a moment and said to Siamu, "Tell your captain friend to go to Cyprus. I'll bear all his losses and give him another $1 million. "All right, I'll go talk to him." Siamu went to negotiate with the captain. Not only did Charlotte bear all the losses, he also gave him an additional $1 million. There was nothing the captain of the cargo ship couldn't agree to, because even if he lost his job, the $1 million would be enough for him to live happily for the rest of his life. After Siamu finished negotiating with the captain immediately asked his helmsman to maintain the wrong course and continue sailing to Cyprus. He even hugged Charlotte and praised his generosity. This actually wasn't a matter of generosity, but a problem that could be solved with money wasn't a problem for Charlotte. Going to Egypt was the original plan, and it wasn't impossible to go to Cyprus now, but it would take a little longer at sea. After solving the problem, Charlotte left the deck. Siamu followed Charlotte into the corridor and whispered, "Boss, what's going on?" Charlotte said, "It's because of the crystal skull, but you can't let your captain friend know." Siamu was stunned for a moment. Then he nodded and said, "I understand." Charlotte said, "Also, keep an eye on the sky. If there are any Israeli planes, let me know immediately." Siamu said, "Then I'll go to the deck and keep an eye on them." "Go." Charlotte entered his cabin. Akiko Tsukino was still guarding his equipment bag in the cabin. When she saw Charlotte returning to the cabin so quickly, a smile appeared on her face. She asked casually, "What happened?" "The cargo ship has deviated from its route. We're not going to port said in Egypt, but to Cyprus," Charlotte said. Akiko Tsukino looked very surprised. "How could it deviate so much? Even if we don't use the navigation instrument, we can't possibly deviate to Cyprus just by looking at the route, right?" "Indeed, a 90-degree deviation would require the helmsman to at least steer the rudder to the maximum, but no qualified helmsman could steer the rudder to the maximum on a straight route." In other words, before the owner of the cargo ship noticed the problem, the cargo ship had already begun to deviate from its route. The crystal skull had most likely interfered with the instrument the moment he boarded the ship. Charlotte pointed to the equipment bag and said, "It's it. It caused the instrument to malfunction." "Crystal skull?" Charlotte nodded. "Yes, it can also make people lose their memories. Xianjun encountered it just now. He chatted with me for a long time, but he actually forgot everything that happened in the past hour." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." Charlotte thought for a moment. "Help me find some lead materials. I want to make a box to store it. Otherwise, if we get on the plane in Cyprus, it might make the plane fly to the United States." "I'll go look for it." Akiko Tsukino followed him out the door. Only Charlotte was left in the cabin. He took out the crystal skull again and placed it on the bed. The crystal skull quietly released a crystal-like luster. It was crystal clear and had an amazing beauty. Charlotte looked at it and spoke to it. "You're just a skull. How can you interfere with modern instruments? Even the instrument can point people in the wrong direction. Do you have a soul?" Charlotte touched it with his hand and felt everything about it. It wasn't a real crystal. Its density and hardness were higher than that of a crystal. In terms of its external features, it was a real skull in every respect. Whose skull was it? What were the components that made it? These two questions appeared in his mind again, but he couldn't find the answer. After a while, Charlotte took out the satellite phone and dialed Liang Xiao's number. Do. The phone was quickly connected. Charlotte said, "Xiao, it's me. Breathe. Breathe. Breathe." A strange voice came from the satellite phone. Charlotte's heart suddenly jumped to his throat. He was extremely nervous. "It's you? What do you want?" It wasn't the first time he heard this voice. The voice from the satellite phone was too similar to the voice of the black-robed man. Every time the black-robed man spoke, there would always be such a voice. Hearing this voice, his first thought was that the black-robed man had kidnapped Liang Xiao and was going to use Liang Xiao to threaten him. Breathe, breathe, breathe. The voice from the satellite phone was still the same. No one spoke. "Speak. What do you want? Come at me," Charlotte said angrily. Breathe, breathe, breathe. The voice from the satellite phone was still the same. Charlotte frowned. He didn't try to make the other party speak. He didn't speak either. He just listened quietly. Breathe, breathe, breathe. The strange voice from the satellite phone seemed to never stop. Charlotte looked at the multifunction watch on his wrist. He was surprised to find that a minute had passed, but the strange voice from the satellite phone continued. He suddenly realized that it wasn't the black-robed man who kidnapped Liang Xiao and then used Liang Xiao's satellite phone to negotiate with him. The satellite phone was interfered with by the crystal skull. The purpose of Charlotte calling Liang Xiao was to test the crystal skull's interference on the communication device. Now that the test result was out, the result made him feel a little creeped out. Charlotte then tried to call Akiko Tsukino's satellite phone. The results soon came out. Even though they were on the same ship, he couldn't contact Akiko Tsukino. Strange, in the video taken by the American archaeologist George was standing on the hillside talking to Professor Mark. At that time, There was no interference. Why is it now? Charlotte thought to himself. Could it be that Professor Mark was standing outside the cave at that time? But that can't be right. Qianjun said it can deceive the detector and the human brain, pointing people to the wrong person. The Israelis have explored the area many times, but they haven't been able to find the correct location. This proves that it covers a large area. How could it be possible to avoid interference by standing outside the cave? Could it be? Could it really be thinking? Or even a soul? The crystal skull had a mind, or even a soul. This was a crazy idea. But other than using this guess to explain the call between George and Professor Mark, Charlotte couldn't find any other explanation. And this conjecture also shocked him. Boss, bad news. Siamu's voice suddenly came from the corridor outside the cabin door, along with his oppressive footsteps. Charlotte quickly put the crystal skull into his equipment bag, then opened the door and walked out. What happened now? We've been discovered by the Israelis, Siamu said anxiously. There's a drone in the sky with a missile. Charlotte couldn't hold it in anymore. He rushed to the deck. A Heron 2 drone was flying over from the direction of Israel. It was very close. He could clearly see the air-to-ground missile on the Heron 2 drone. It wasn't an ordinary air-to-ground missile, but the latest God of War air-to-ground missile developed by the Israeli Military Industries Corporation. It had the ability to strike accurately from a long distance. Of course, the God of War missiles on the Heron 2 drone were drone versions, not the 500-kilogram ones carried by fighter jets. It probably weighed about 100 kilograms, and it was equipped with 4 God of War missiles. But even if it wasn't the heavyweight God of War carried by fighter jets, it was just a lightweight God of War carried by a drone. The cargo ship wouldn't be able to withstand even one. It would be great if there was a shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missile at this time. But due to the nature of this mission, Charlotte and the members of the Zodiac squad didn't carry any shoulder-launched anti-aircraft missiles. The Heron 2 drone flew above the cargo ship in the blink of an eye at a height of about 2,000 meters. Charlotte said anxiously, Siamu, go get me Ngumi Khan's sniper rifle. I'll shoot it down with the XL 2500 sniper rifle. Only you can do this job, Siamu said as he ran to the entrance of the cabin. But before Siamu could run to the entrance of the cabin, the Heron 2 hovering in the sky suddenly fired a God of War missile. The God of War missile flew through the blue sky and white clouds with a fiery tail. With the power of the God of War, it could easily tear a huge hole in the hull of the ship. Within an hour of its explosion, the cargo ship would fall silent because of water. If it bombed the cockpit, the target would be the cargo ship's electronic instruments and power equipment, and the ship would no longer be able to reach Cyprus. It's going to blow up the right side of the hull. Charlotte quickly determined where the God of War was going to blow up. He quickly rushed to the left side of the deck, and then pounced on the left side of the deck. Siamu also fell on the left side of the deck, looking nervously at the God of War missile falling from the sky. Chapter 1038. The God of War whistled over with an aura that could destroy everything. At that moment, not to mention others, even Charlotte's mind went blank. The God of War air-to-ground missile flew to the left side of the ship in the blink of an eye. Boom! A pillar of water shot into the sky. The hull shook, but there was no fire, and there was no explosion. Charlotte suddenly got up from the deck and rushed to the left side of the ship. The hull was intact, and the God of War air-to-ground missile didn't hit the hull. Instead, it plunged into the sea and exploded underwater. Whoosh whoosh. 2 God of War missiles whistled over. It wasn't known if the person controlling the Heron 2 was from Mossad or the Israeli Air Force, but he was clearly furious. He fired 2 God of War air-to-ground missiles at once, obviously wanting to blow up the entire cargo ship in one go. Siamu knelt on the deck, placed his hands flat on the deck, and prayed devoutly. God is great. I am your most loyal servant. Like Sino, the Iraqi ship owner also knelt on the ground and prayed. Xiaolei, on the other hand, was still standing, motionless as he watched the 2 missiles descending from the sky with thunderous fury. At that moment, There was no fear in his heart, only tranquility. There was even a hint of a smile on his lips, because he knew that as long as that thing was there, the Israelis wouldn't be able to blow up the cargo ship. One of the two air-to-ground missiles plunged into the sea in front of the bow, and the other into the sea behind the stern. Boom, boom. Two pillars of water shot into the sky. The shockwave from the explosion swept over with astonishing momentum, but it couldn't shake the fully loaded cargo ship. Charlotte faced the drone, raised his right hand, and then extended his middle finger at the drone. It was a provocative and insulting gesture. Israel, Mossad Base Command Center in Jerusalem. Charlotte's image was magnified several times, as well as his middle finger. On the central display was the face of an Indian. His mouth had a contemptuous smile, and his eyes contained unparalleled confidence. A facial recognition software was running on the display, analyzing and comparing point by point. Soon, another face also appeared on the screen. It was Charlotte's face. The facial recognition system concluded that the facial features matched 55% and the physical features matched 100%. The facial recognition system had already locked onto Xiaolei, which was the reason why it had displayed Xiaolei's photo. His body and bones were a perfect match, so the facial recognition system had already locked onto Xiaolei. It's him. The corner of Kern's mouth twitched, his eyes filled with rage. After confirming that it was Charlotte, Yin Fo took out a satellite phone and made a call. The call was to King Williams of the CIB. Mr. Williams, I have bad news for you. Did the criminal escape? It was Williams' voice. He's not important. Yin Fo took a deep breath. After he calmed down, he said, "What I want to tell you is, Charlotte is not dead." Ah, what? That's impossible. William's voice was like an exploding grenade. What nonsense are you talking about? Yin Fo was not angry at all. His tone had also calmed down. Later, Mossad's people will share the information with the CIB. You'll know what I'm talking about then. Charlotte came to Israel, and he rescued the criminal that we wanted to bring back to the U.S. I'll immediately send people to Charlotte's grave. I'm going to dig up his grave. Williams was still unwilling to believe that Charlotte was not dead. How could it be like this? Assassination after assassination, finally succeeding, only to find out that it was a scam. That China kid, why couldn't he just die and let everyone be happy? If it's really him, I want you to hunt him down at all costs. I'll get the nearest U.S. Army to support you. Tell me, where is he now? Yin Fo said, he's on a cargo ship to Cyprus. It was originally going to Port Said in Egypt, but I don't know why it changed its course to Cyprus. The Israeli satellite found it, and then they sent a drone to investigate, and then they found Charlotte and his people. They all had makeup on, but they fought in the Gaza Strip, and the Israeli spies secretly took pictures of them. Are you sure they're on that cargo ship? Now, yes, Mossad's people just verified Charlotte's identity. They activated the facial recognition system, and the probability of an error is less than 5%, Yin Fo said. Then what are you waiting for? Israel should send a plane to blow up that ship. Israel did do that, but their drone launched 3 air-to-ground missiles, but they couldn't hit the cargo ship. What's going on? It might be the problem with the Israeli drone or missiles. I'll ask the U.S. Navy to intervene and use U.S. fighter jets to bomb the cargo ship. This is the best chance to kill Charlotte, and if we miss this chance, there won't be a next time, Yin Fo said, his eyes flashing with a fierce light. Our 6th Fleet is in the Mediterranean Sea. I'll call the Pentagon immediately. Williams hung up the phone. At this time, Kern suddenly gave an order to the technician operating the drone. Let our drone approach the cargo ship and fire a missile at close range. If it still doesn't work, just crash into it. The technician operating the drone executed Kern's order. On the central display, the drone dived down from the sky. 5 seconds later, its altitude dropped to 500 meters, and it was only a kilometer away from the cargo ship. At such a distance, let alone a precision-guided missile, even a rifle shooting at a target the size of the cargo ship would have a hit rate of 90%. The technician operating the drone pressed the launch button. Whoosh! The last War God air-to-ground missile flew toward the cargo ship. 2 seconds later, the war god air-to-ground missile flew toward the rear of the cargo ship. Then, it deviated from its trajectory and plunged into the sea. Boom! The splash of the last missile was very good, and it almost didn't cause much waves as it plunged into the sea. What's going on? Tell me. Kearns roared. The technician operating the drone had an innocent expression. I don't know. At this time, the Heron 2 drone suddenly dived toward the sea, and 3 seconds later, it plunged into the sea. The wing broke, and the fuselage sank to the bottom of the sea. The image of the cargo ship on the central display disappeared. Switch to the satellite image. Quick! Kearns roared. The satellite image quickly appeared. In the endless Mediterranean Sea, where's the cargo ship? Looking at the rolling waves of the sea, Kearns' mouth was wide open, and he didn't give any new orders. Mediterranean Sea, on the cargo ship. Ha ha! Long live Allah! The Iraqi ship owner rushed to the deck. He looked at the wing of the drone floating in the sea and said excitedly, Allah must be protecting us. Our prayers have been answered by Allah. The Israelites, huh? They're a joke. The reactions of the sailors varied. Some were excited. Some were still in a state of shock. Siamu climbed up from the deck, and he looked at Charlotte, his eyes full of devotion and reverence. He didn't believe that his prayers had been answered by Allah, because he didn't know how many times he had prayed in his life, but he never got a response. For this to happen, he concluded that the reason was Siale. His eyes were filled with reverence for God. Charlotte retracted his gaze from the sea. His face didn't have the slightest bit of joy from the crisis being resolved, but instead, it was solemn. Boss, are you God? Siamu probed. Charlotte stopped in his tracks. If I'm God, can I not pay you? Siamu grinned. You're a human, the best man. Charlotte wasn't in the mood to joke with him. He said, immediately summon all our people to my cabin. The crisis we're facing this time isn't over. It's just begun. Siamu said, we'll soon enter the waters of Cyprus. The Israelis won't dare to fly their fighter jets into an EU member state to attack us. Charlotte said, I'm not talking about Israel, but the United States. The U.S. Sixth Fleet is stationed in the Mediterranean Sea. Do you expect us to use a cargo ship to defeat them? The U.S. fighter jets won't care about any EU member state. I'll go right away. Siamu's expression also changed. Charlotte returned to his cabin, opened his equipment bag, and picked up the crystal skull. The crystal skull didn't change at all, still emitting a pure and cold light, crystal clear. It was lifeless, motionless, and didn't show any signs. Everything that had just happened seemed to have nothing to do with it. But Charlotte knew that the reason the cargo ship still existed was entirely because of it. If you have a soul, if you have a mind, please tell me, what are you? If you're a human skull, what kind of existence are you when you're alive? Charlotte said to himself. The crystal skull didn't respond at all, only emitting a faint, cold light. The members of the Zodiac team came to Charlotte's cabin, including Qianjun. The eyes of the members of the Zodiac team were focused on the crystal skull in Charlotte's hands. Charlotte said, it can interfere with modern instruments and equipment, and it's also because of it that we're still alive. But after all, the crisis just now was caused by a drone. I believe that the U.S. Sixth Fleet will soon send fighter jets to this area, or even submarines. If it can interfere with the Israeli drone, then it can interfere with the U.S. fighter jets and submarines, Yumi Khan said. Charlotte shook his head. You're thinking of the problem too simply. We don't know how many instruments this crystal skull can interfere with. If the instruments on 1 or 2 planes are its limit, and the Sixth Fleet is coming out in full force, we'll die without even a speck of dust left. Yumi Khan was silent, his expression solemn. It was clearly unwise to leave their fate in the hands of the crystal skull, which they didn't understand at all. Charlotte continued, another situation we have to consider is that the crystal skull will interfere with the instruments. It will definitely consume some kind of energy. The more it interferes, the faster its energy will be consumed. If the Sixth Fleet's fighter jets use up all its stored energy in one wave of attack, we'll still die without even a speck of dust left. The members of the Zodiac team were silent, each of their hearts heavy to the extreme. Also, Charlotte said, "Finally, we have to face the worst situation." "What other situation?" Siamu couldn't help but ask. Charlotte said, "Cannonballs don't need any equipment." "How many times do you think this cargo ship we're on can withstand the bombardment of the U.S. warships? Or die without even a speck of dust left?" Chapter 1039. They would die this way, that way, and they would still die if they changed. Each of the three possibilities that Charlotte mentioned was possible, and the probability of them being realized was very high. Especially the last possibility. As long as the U.S. warships approached the cargo ship, it would only take 1 or 2 shells to sink it. "Boss, I know you must have a plan in your mind." Akiko Tsukino said, "You called us here to tell us your plan. What do you want us to do?" She was like this, never asking for the reason. As long as Charlotte gave her an instruction, she would do it. Charlotte was silent for a moment, then said, "There is a speedboat on this cargo ship. We will put down the speedboat, take enough fuel, food, and water, and then bypass Cyprus. We will leave this dangerous area first, and then we will plan for the next step." "Yelena, let's do this," Akiko Tsukino said. Yelena nodded and followed Akiko Tsukino out of the cabin. "Engumi-kan, you go too. You help Akiko and Yelena with the food problem, but I have to remind you, don't take curry in the kitchen," Charlotte said. "Engumi-kan." Although Charlotte's reminder made him speechless, he still went. Charlotte's eyes moved to Siamu and Qianjun. "You two go and tie up the captain and the sailors. It's best to injure them. You can be more ruthless." Qianjun nodded. This was the first time he was asked to do something as the leader of a Zodiac squad, and he accepted. Siamu hesitated. He wanted to say something, but he didn't say it. Charlotte said, "Siamu, I know it's difficult for you to do this, but you have to understand, we can't take your friends and their sailors away. They will be caught by the Americans and even interrogated. We will make it look like we kidnapped them, so they can get away with it. You go and tell your friends that we kidnapped them, and they don't know anything. I'll give your friend $2 million and his sailors $500,000 each as compensation." "Okay, I know what to do," Siamu said. He and Qianjun left the cabin. They left the cargo ship and drove the speedboat away. This was the best way that Charlotte could think of. Apart from this, he couldn't think of any other way to resolve the crisis. As for Siam's friend the captain and his sailors, they would indeed have to bear great risks, but if they could survive, they would live a prosperous life and would no longer have to toil on the sea. Everything has a price, and this was the price that they needed to pay. A few minutes later, Charlotte arrived on the deck. Tsukino Anko, Yelena, and Angamian had finished preparing the boats, fuel, food, and water. Siamu and Qianjun and prepared the captain and his sailors. "Goodbye, my friend. God bless you." The Iraqi captain, who had been beaten black and blue, greeted Xiaolei with a face full of smiles. If not for his hands being tied up, he would have given Xiaolei a hug. The sailors who were tied up like dumplings were also laughing heartily. Their smiles were all directed at the $500,000. $500,000 wasn't much for rich people, but for these poor sailors, it was a life-changing wealth. Remember what Siamu said to you. Put all the blame on us. You don't know anything. Act well. Don't mess it up. Allah bless you. Xiaolei left these words in Arabic and then went down the rope ladder on the side of the boat to the speedboat. The members of the Zodiac squad boarded the speedboat one after another. Siamu drove the speedboat to the east. A speedboat could carry 5 people, but Charlotte and the members of the Zodiac squad added up to 6 people. One more person didn't matter, but it affected the fuel, food, and water reserves. According to a person's weight of 120 pounds, if this weight was changed into fuel, food, and water, it would be enough for several people to eat for a few days. The fuel could also make the speedboat sail farther. "Boss, the food and water on the speedboat can only support us for 3 days. I wanted to take more, but the speedboat can't bear any more weight," Engumi-kan said. Charlotte frowned. What about the fuel? Yelena said, I prepared the fuel. If this speedboat sailed 24 hours, we would run out of fuel after 30 hours. Charlotte smiled bitterly. The fuel problem was more serious than the food and water problems. After all, this was just a speedboat. It was impossible to carry so many people and a lot of supplies. If we can't, we can row. Akiko Tsukino seemed very relaxed. If there's no food, we can catch fish. What about water? Sayamo asked. Akiko Tsukino's eyes were as sharp as knives. Solve it yourself. Sayamo, the problem of water made everyone's mood become heavy. Indeed, without fuel, the speedboat could be rowed by hand. Without food, they could catch fish to eat. But without water, would they have to drink seawater? That way, they would die faster. Charlotte thought for a moment and suddenly said, Akiko, do you have a bra? Ah. Akiko Tsukino suddenly froze on the spot. Her face also had a trace of embarrassment and shyness. If Charlotte had asked her such a question in the case of only the two of them, she would not only answer Charlotte's question, but she would even openly lift her clothes. What was a bra? She could even show him a bra. But when Charlotte asked her such a question in front of so many people, she didn't know how to answer. Charlotte took a careful look at her chest. You have a bra, so wear it well. When there's no water, give it to me. Then he looked at Yelena and said, You also have a bra, so wear it well. When there's no water, give it to me. Yelena, Angumi-kan said with a smile, Boss, you won't use their bras to scoop water for us, will you? Yelena slapped the back of Angumi-kan's head. Angumi-kan was slapped, but he laughed happily. Qianjun said, Boss, if you want to use their bras to filter seawater, the filtration performance of their bras is almost negligible. Angumi-kan mentioned the two women's bras, so he was slapped. Qianjun also mentioned the two women's bras, but no one hit him. This was also the first time that Qianjun had called Charlotte boss. Although it was just a form of address, to a man like Qianjun, it represented his loyalty. The Snake of the Zodiac team had really returned. Charlotte was happy. He smiled and said, What I want is not the filtration performance of the bras, but their absorbability. There are sponges in the bras, which have a strong absorbability. In addition, we also have food packaging. Most of the packaging has tin foil. We just need to put the tin foil into the shape of a pot cover and then put it on the water-absorbing bras. When the sun shines, the seawater will evaporate, and the steam will condense into water droplets on the tinfoil. If we collect those water droplets, won't we get pure water? Qianjun didn't expect that Charlotte would give such an explanation. He was slightly stunned, and then he smiled. Wow, boss, you are really an elephant god. Angumi-kan also smiled, but it was a sneaky smile because he was imagining the scene of Akiko, Tsukino, and Yelena losing their bras, and the scene of them collecting distilled water from the bras naked. Slap! Yelena's slap fell on the back of Angumi-kan's head again. Why did you hit me again? Why don't you go fight Qianjun? Angumi-kan looked very depressed, but he was very happy in his heart. In fact, he could have dodged, but he didn't. He liked to be slapped by Russian women. Charlotte didn't have to do anything to hook up with women, but he couldn't. He had to work harder. Qianjun just smiled and didn't say anything. He wasn't familiar with the members of the Zodiac team, and he needed some time to integrate into the team. The speedboat was very fast, and the cargo ship was soon left behind. It was so far away that it couldn't be seen with binoculars. Just an hour after the speedboat left, 3 Super Hornets, escorted a shadow scout, appeared in the area where the cargo ship was. At this time, the cargo ship had completely stopped. It didn't drop anchor, and it drifted along the sea at an almost negligible speed. Command Center, we have arrived at the target area, and we are scanning and scouting the target. On the Shadow Scout, the captain took the communicator and reported the mission to the command center of the 6th Fleet. The 3 Super Hornets flew over the cargo ship, and one of them dropped a cluster bomb. Boom! The cluster bomb exploded in the sea, setting off a column of water, and the cargo ship shook violently in the surging sea. However, this was not because the Super Hornet was disturbed, but because the pilot carried out the order of the commander of the 6th Fleet and used this method to test the cargo ship's reaction. The cargo ship didn't respond. The 3 Super Hornets and the Shadow Scout were also normal, without any interference. No interference. All instruments are normal. The captain of the Shadow Scout continued to report the status of the mission. Scan completed. There are no armed personnel on the ship, and the crew is tied up, requesting next action instructions. At the same time, at the CIA headquarters in Langley, the United States, William stared at a monitor on the wall of the office, watching the synchronous satellite image transmitted by the 6th Fleet's Command Center. The voice of the captain of the Shadow Scout also appeared in his office, and it was the captain's description that made him anxious. There was only the captain and the crew. Charlotte and his men couldn't be seen. This was the Mediterranean Sea, not a virgin forest. How could those guys disappear without a trace in an hour's time? The voice of the captain of the Shadow Scout came through the speaker. Radar reconnaissance results. There are no ships in this area. Williams couldn't listen to it anymore. He grabbed the telephone on the table. Immediately let the commandos of the 6th Fleet board the cargo ship, arrest everyone, and interrogate them. Let the Shadow Recon plane expand its search range. Don't miss any ships. Even the small fishing boats of Cyprus must be carefully investigated. Also, immediately let the spy satellites enter the Mediterranean Sea. This time, even if we have to scoop up all the water in the Mediterranean Sea, we must find that guy. Yes, immediately. A voice came through the phone. Williams put down the phone and tapped his fingers on the oak table. 10 seconds later, he picked up the phone again and dialed a number. This call was made to Yang Shan, the station chief of the CIB's China Capital Intelligence Station. Yang Shan, immediately evacuate and temporarily close the intelligence station. What happened? Charlotte may not be dead. What? Yang Shan's voice was full of surprise. How is that possible? Our observers confirmed that he is dead. He can't be alive. Williams said, confirm it again. Also, immediately contact Eugene Lee and let him steal the formula and production technology of Mystic Gold X in advance. If Charlotte is really not dead, his identity may be exposed at any time. Okay, I'll do it right away. It was Yang Shan's voice. Williams put down the phone again and tapped his fingers on the oak table. Talk, 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 talk. How reliable was Israel's intelligence? Was Charlotte dead or alive? This was the question he wanted to find out. Chapter 1040. Yelena's prediction came true. Before there was a problem with food and water, they ran out of fuel. There was a vast sea in their field of vision, and they didn't know where the end was. After 30 hours of sailing, it was night when the speedboat stopped. The Zodiac team's multifunction watch couldn't be used normally. The time shown was 12 noon, and the location shown was near the waters of Tunisia. However, the speedboat had been sailing east, and the reference was also the sun. The crystal skull obviously couldn't interfere with the sun's movement. Therefore, although they didn't know the specific location, it was estimated that they were going to the waters of Turkey. When they ran out of fuel, the spare oars came in handy. The people rowing the boat were Angumi Khan and Siamu. If I had known earlier, I would have filled less water and more oil. As Angumi Khan rowed the boat to escape, he regretted loading the speedboat with too much water and food. Moreover, he didn't put a piece of curry on the speedboat. Siamu also complained, Akiko, Yelena, come and row the boat. You've been sitting for too long. You need to move your muscles. Yelena said, do you have a nerve to ask a woman to do this kind of work? Siamu, I'll row, Qianjun said. Okay. Siamu then gave way and handed the oars to Qianjun. The reason why Qianjun wanted to replace Siamu was because he wanted to integrate into the team in this way. Charlotte also said, Angumi Khan, take a break. Let me do it. It's okay, I can still row. Angumi Khan said with a smile, you're my elephant god. How can I let you do this kind of work? The elephant god, in the eyes of the Indians, was the god of wisdom, the god of removing obstacles, and the god of wealth. It was equivalent to the highly intelligent version of Guan Yu in the eyes of the Chinese. Was there anyone who let Guan Yu row the boat while sitting and resting? Charlotte took the oars from Angumi Khan and replaced him to row the boat. Boss, let me row the boat, Akiko Tsukino said. Charlotte smiled. Yelena is right. How can a woman do this job? Let the men do the rowing, and you will deal with the water. From tomorrow onwards, you will have to use that method to collect water. Akiko, Tsukino, and Yelena couldn't help but look at each other. Both women had an awkward look on their faces. Engumi-kan said with a smile, "Boss, isn't it just a bra? What's there to be embarrassed about? But won't the water be milky in this way?" As soon as he finished speaking, he received another slap on the back of his head. The one who hit him was Yelena. The Russian woman's temper had the attributes of vodka. Not every man could accept such a woman, but Engumi-kan was obviously one of them. Without any pursuers, they chatted and laughed. The atmosphere was very relaxed. Rowing the boat with oars was not much faster than walking. Charlotte and Xianjun rowed for almost 3 hours, and the speedboat moved forward about 30 kilometers. At this rate, it would take at least a month or even longer to reach the shore from Turkey. With such a long time, even if they solved the food problem by catching fish and the drinking water problem by using the 2 bras, they still wouldn't be able to make it to Turkey, because the human body needed a lot of elements. Eating fish every day couldn't satisfy the human body's needs. For example, potassium, which could affect the heartbeat, and various trace elements that the human body needed. It wasn't a big problem if these elements weren't ingested for a few days, but if they couldn't ingest them for a month, the human body's functions would definitely decline. At that time, illness would be the lightest symptom. If it was serious, it could even kill people. It wasn't that Charlotte didn't know this, but he didn't want the atmosphere to become heavy. He was the leader of the Zodiac team, and maintaining the team's morale was also his responsibility. Therefore, even though he knew the problem was serious, he wouldn't bring it up at this time. "Boss, I'm really—" Ngu was sweating profusely at this moment. Charlotte said, "Say what you want to say. Why are you hesitating?" Engumi-kan said, "I can't hold it anymore. I want to go to the bathroom." Charlotte, this was also a problem that needed to be solved. The speedboat was not a yacht. There was no bathroom in the narrow space. If the passengers on the speedboat were all men, it would be easy to solve the problem. They could just turn around and unzip the zipper. But the problem was that there were 2 women on the speedboat, Akiko, Tsukino, and Yelena. The men couldn't solve the problem in front of them, could they? Also, Akiko, Tsukino, and Yelena couldn't solve the problem in front of the men, could they? "I don't care. I want to solve the problem." Engumi-kan turned around and unzipped the zipper. In fact, not only Engumi-kan, but other people also had this kind of need, including Charlotte. But when Engumi-kan took it out, Yelena kicked his butt and kicked him into the sea. "You?" Engumi-kan stared at Yelena and looked a little angry. Yelena said, "Let's solve it in the sea." After that, she also jumped into the sea. Engumi-kan was a little angry at first, but when he saw Yelena also jump into the sea to solve the problem, his heart calmed down. He stared at Yelena's body in the sea, trying very hard to see something, but he couldn't see anything except the sea. "What are you looking at? If you keep looking, I'll dig your eyes out," Yelena said fiercely. Engumi-kan smiled cheekily and said, "Don't you know how to be gentle?" Yelena looked at Engumi-kan and said, "Do you like gentle women?" Engumi-kan said, "No. I like women like you, just a little more gentle." Yelena suddenly swam to Engumi-kan. Engumi-kan looked at Yelena in surprise. He was a little embarrassed because he was in the men's bathroom and Yelena was in the women's bathroom. Yelena suddenly swam to him, which was equivalent to going from the women's bathroom to the men's bathroom. But when Engumi-kan was stunned, Yelena suddenly reached out and hooked her arms around Engumi-kan's neck and kissed his lips. At that moment, he was as nervous as a child, and his kissing movements were very stiff. "What's going on?" Saimu said with a smile. "Do you want us to make room for you? Do you two want to do it?" "You shut up." Yelena and Engumi-kan scolded Saimu almost at the same time. Saimu shrugged and had a bad smile on his face. On the speedboat, Akiko Tsukino's eyes moved to Charlotte. Her eyes were full of expectation and excitement. This time they escaped from death. Yelena and Engumi-kan were together. Should she and Charlotte do something to celebrate? Charlotte avoided Akiko Tsukino's eyes and looked into the distance. 2 seconds later, he suddenly exclaimed, "There's an island ahead. Where is it?" Sayamo followed, but he didn't see anything. Qianjun looked through the scope of his military sniper rifle, but he still couldn't see it clearly. Charlotte said, "It seems to be an island. We can see it clearly if we row a little further." Elena and Angyumi Khan climbed onto the speedboat. Angyumi Khan took the oar from Charlotte, and Sayamo took the oar from Qianjun. The two continued to row forward. About 10 minutes later, everyone could see the island. It was not big, and the shoreline of the island was only 10 kilometers long. It was in the shape of a gourd. The main body of the island was two steamed bun-shaped mountains, which were covered with dense primeval forests. There were no lights, and there was no dock. It looked like an uninhabited island. The speedboat came to the shallow waters of the island. Angyumi Khan plunged the anchor into the sand and saw that it was fixed. Everyone got off the speedboat with the supplies, waded into the water, and climbed the beach of the island. Yelena and Angyumi Khan divided the food, while Qianjun and Sima used knives to cut branches and vines to cover the speedboat. This way, they could avoid being discovered by the American spy satellites. Charlotte stood on the beach and observed the environment of the island. He used his telescopic and microscopic vision abilities to carefully observe every place he could see. In the end, he confirmed that this was an uninhabited island. This judgment made him a little depressed because he didn't want this island to be uninhabited. On the contrary, he hoped that there was a village on this island where he could buy fuel and other supplies. He could even buy a bigger, faster boat, then go to Turkey, take Istanbul, then go to Russia, and finally return to China. This was the safest route. If he wanted to go faster, he could take a plane back to China in Turkey. But that would be very risky. "Boss, eat something." Akiko Tsukino brought a bottle of mineral water, a piece of bread, and a ham sausage for Charlotte. Charlotte sat on the beach and ate something with Akiko Tsukino. He saw Yelena and Angyumi Khan walking into the forest, and he couldn't help but smile. All adults knew what Elena and Angyumi Khan were doing in the forest. Charlotte's gaze shifted to Sayamo and Qianjun, who were chatting on the beach. He was also very happy in his heart. He could see that Qianjun was working hard to integrate into the Zodiac team. Angyumi Khan and Yelena. Akiko Tsukino wanted to say something, but stopped. Charlotte smiled. Angyumi Khan and Yelena are both adults. It's normal. Don't worry about them. No, what I want to say is that there are many mosquitoes in the forest. When they come out, they will definitely have more bumps on their butts. Akiko Tsukino said. Ha ha ha. Charlotte was amused by her. Us. Akiko Tsukino stared at Charlotte. Charlotte was stunned for a moment, and then he got up. I want to go to the other side of the island to have a look. It's the same situation here, but I can't guarantee that it's the same situation on the other side. This is just an uninhabited island. What do you want to see? Akiko Tsukino looked a little disappointed. Charlotte said, "If we're lucky, there might be people living on the other side of the island. As long as there are people living there, we can get fuel and even a boat. You take a rest. I'll just look around. This island isn't big. I could go around the beach and reach the other side in half an hour." How can I do that? I don't feel at ease if you go alone. Akiko Tsukino also got up and insisted on going with him. Charlotte smiled bitterly. All right then, let's go and have a look together. Akiko Tsukino followed Charlotte. She wanted to hold his hand several times, but she always lacked the courage. Sayama's voice came from behind. Boss, remember to wear a condom. Otherwise, you'll get your fifth child. Charlotte was speechless. Strangely, this time Akiko Tsukino didn't say anything. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.